background is just fascinating, and your vision of the future is fascinating. And as we were discussing, and I guess, yeah, we could just start rolling now. As we were discussing in the sauna, or maybe in the gym when I first met you at Matt's reveal dinner, you discussed all these various topics that to me would have been like, this is fantasy. This is none of this. This guy, he's got to be bullshitting me or something. But like a lot of it at the time felt, I would say, because of the experiences that I've gone through with ayahuasca, I was like, like this is somewhat something that I can digest as truth. And but I think to like the average American or average human being, they might think that some of the things you're portraying are like, this is crazy, this is fictitious or fantasy. And then getting into, I've heard of Hermetic law, so some of the principles behind Hermetics, maybe once or twice in my life, but it's been mentioned in your Instagram many times. So it seems like it's a practice and principles that you are very much aligned with. So super excited to have you on. And thank you for taking the time to, out of your day. I know you just flew in last night. So if you want to just start off with who you are, maybe a little bit of your background of what you did in the past. I've got some notes of, it's like bioenergetic, just studying different like human functions when it comes to energy and physiology and whatnot. So if you want to dive into that and just wherever you want to begin.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I always enjoy doing podcasts, right? Just because it's such a great outlet for me to share essentially a message.
Yeah.
Right? And I think every human wants to be seen and heard. And so this is just a great platform. So thank you. Yeah. So I think, I believe all humans go through a certain story arc. Joseph Campbell would call it the hero's journey. And I think in the beginning of that hero's journey, we are motivated by less pain, essentially. And so how I embarked on this journey was, I was basically sick of being sick at age 14. I like held a knife in my hand, contemplated suicide, felt alone, misunderstood, and all the things. And, in my childhood, raised by a single parent who worked like 80 hours a week, pretty much unsupervised. And so I, spent most of my day like playing video games and eating Oreo cookies and Chips Ahoy all day. And you can imagine that does not produce a healthy mind or body, right? And so sick all the time, allergies, all the things. And in that moment where I had the knife in my hand, this voice came to me that said, there's no difference between you, Martin Luther King, and Bill Gates. Very specific names.
You were 14 at the time?
14, yeah. And just to give you context, I've had these sort of knowings that would come to me since age 5. And so I've learned to kind of listen to them. And so, but this was a very specific message. There's no difference between you, Martin Luther King, and Bill Gates. The only difference is they think differently. And I was like, huh. And so from that point on, I embarked on this journey of learning how to think, essentially. Right. So my first book was Psycho-Cybernetics, which is about like programming the subconscious mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Maxwell
Maxwell
that
Maltz.
book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
And around 16, someone gave me the Bhagavad Gita. So that was my sort of like first spiritual book. And it really just since then have embarked on this journey of understanding and living how essentially the mind, body, and spirit works. Right. And so along the ways, I did pick up some degrees in biomechanics and master's and doctorate in physical therapy and, treated roughly 9,000 patients in 20 years. But, I've also always been an entrepreneur, right? Actually, I would say I'm always seeing something that I would want that doesn't exist in a marketplace. So I go and make it. And then somehow that turns into a business, right? And so, when I was 20, I had a supplement company. and over the years, started and owned multiple companies. And so, and so that experience gave me great insight into how humans function, right? From many perspectives. But what's really interesting about this is 14 years ago, I was in my clinic in New Jersey. I went upstairs in my clinic to get a massage. And a minute after the massage was done, I got a text message that said, "How was your massage?" from a friend here in Wimberley, Texas. I'm in New Jersey, right? So Texas, New Jersey.
Yep.
So my response was like, "How do you know I just got a massage?" And her answer, which was, "Your soul told me," really was undeniable proof, if you will, that there's something else going on. And so I shifted from reading about all the spiritual things to traveling the world and really living it. And that's where alchemy and hermetics came in. So just to give you context of how that sort of entered into my life.
And can you just maybe explain it like I'm 5, what hermetics is?
Sure, yeah. So really the full context is Hermes, which was like the messenger god essentially, right? In Greek mythology. They're called hermetic laws because he was also credited essentially with like writing these laws. But if you really go back, people believe that Thoth or Thoth in Egyptian sort of philosophy, lineage, or mythology, essentially it was the same God, same spirit, same deity, right? And so eventually he came back again as Belinus after Hermes. And so these hermetic laws were derived from actual written scriptures or tablets. There's something called the Ammortal tablet, and the Ammortal tablet isn't mythological. They've studied the substance of it. It's not from Earth. They know, right? It looks like emerald, but it's not emerald. And so this is like real life, actual. It's been in the hands of humans. In fact, the person that translated because it wasn't written in English, that translated the Emerald Tablet into English was Sir Isaac Newton. Right. So many of the scientists that we knew in American history were also alchemists. They just kind of hid that because the church would have been pretty upset. Because alchemy, the study of alchemy says, there's no middleman, you are divine, you are God. Church is the middleman that says you need this in order to do that.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay. And so, when you were 14, the pain that you were feeling, that was just from living a life that was kind of unhealthy with all the Oreos and like what you were consuming and whatnot.
Yeah. And so from a physical perspective, a biological perspective, sure, I was basically eating chemicals, right? Mostly. And from a mental, emotional perspective, I believe there's two things. So when I was 5, I was, playing some cards with my brother and my cousins and some friends. And basically, something happened to that card game, where I took on the story like, oh, they don't understand me and they don't want to play with me. I remember that story being embedded. And so that really led to a lifelong, really into like mid-30s, this experience of like, people don't understand me. Right. And that story tends to lead to loneliness. And so it was that. Plus, when I was about 7.5, I believe, I like walked into a room and literally saw my dad like physically fighting my mom, trying to choke her to death. And so that imparted obviously this extreme sense of like, I would say it's more than fear. If there's something, a stronger word for fear, I don't know what that word is. I felt that.
Terror.
Right. Yeah. Terror. Right? And so literally like I ran and like, I remember like my physical body was shaking.
Yeah.
And, my brother who's 5 years older was like, holding me and just, making sure I was okay. And so, that really led to what I would consider the root energetic cause of the state that I was in when I was 14. So,
I've mentioned this with certain guests I've had on the past. I've also experienced at a very young age, 4 years old, of abusive states with so mother passed when I was really young at the age of 3. And then at the age of 4, went through like an abusive dynamic with this girlfriend that my dad was dating at the time, who was no longer in the picture. But it caused just, terror within me as well. And I could feel that, shaking and like tension within my body. And that kind of carried on through most likely stories that I was creating at that young of an age into, adolescence. And I mean, I would even say to this day, like I'm still transmuting different, frequencies within my own life and existence, but also the stories and the thoughts that I'm creating around that. And so, I enjoy you sharing that because it does resonate with what I also experienced as a young boy, and has led me to, pursuing creative paths that I think otherwise may not have occurred. I think that pain can be a great lesson. It's information. So that's great context. And so you did physical therapy. Do you want to get into that path and treating?
Yeah.
Because you had a video, I didn't watch the whole thing. It was like an hour long with a doctor. I believe it was on the topic of Western medicine, traditional healthcare, and trying to, I wouldn't say escape, but like navigating through that. Because as we've discussed off the mic, that it's not optimal for living your full potential. So would love to hear that part of your life and how that evolved and changed into, where you are today.
Yeah, that's a big topic. And before I get to that, I want to say, one of the Hermetic laws being the law of vibration, we tend to attract and be around people of similar frequencies, basically. And in fact, what I've learned recently, which is really interesting, is that as I've gotten to know my friends deeper, and even some of the people that attend some of the retreats, experiences, and activations that I do, I never realized this until this year, is that I think almost everyone that I've come in contact with at a deep level has shared one would call a near-death experience, or something happened where like they could have died, right? And so really interesting. And also with the whole terror thing. And the reason is I believe that code that's in us will magnetize people of the same code. And we're all meant to come together to support each other. And in fact, transmute that together and magnify the transmutation of that. In other words, we come with the original ingredient and then we make it into something even more beautiful, and we're meant to kind of share that out into the world. So I just want to put that into the talking circle before we jump into the healthcare side. And so when it comes to healthcare, I was traditionally trained, master's and doctorate in physical therapy, went to med school, and treated like 9,000 patients in the 20 years. And what I learned about maybe 10 years into practice, especially when I went into the alchemy hermetic side of reality, what I realized is that the entire context of reality that we live in may not be the most serving for us, right? And that's everything, right? Not just, right now we're talking about healthcare, but everything, right? And so if we apply that insight into healthcare, I always say to people, imagine you have a child comes home from school with, a report card, which is like data. And a report card just says F, 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 right? You look at all the data, F in science, F in math, F in history, F in English. You look at your child, you look at the data, you go, got it. You have stupidity. Like we would never say that. But the doctor will look at your blood work data and go, you have blank, right? You have diabetes. And so imagine if we simply change the language of healthcare. When a doctor looks at your data, your A1C levels are this and your blood sugar is that, they say something along the lines of, hey, tell me what's happening in your life. Because right now, your body is having a tough time processing like sugars and carbohydrates that you're eating. Tell me what's happening with your life. Imagine that conversation versus you have diabetes and we recommend these drugs, right? And so the imprint of you have, right? If you tell a child you have stupidity repeatedly, the child will believe it. And the child eventually just takes on the identity of I am stupid. Just like if you tell a diabetes or a patient you have diabetes enough years, what does the patient say? Shows up in their language, I am a diabetic. And now it becomes their identity. And so once it's your identity, forget medications and all the things. Your identity, which is your ego, is one of the strongest, as we all know, attachment things that we have, right? That binds us. And so the entire industry, right, is designed to say you have diabetes, you have ADHD, you have narcissism, you have whatever, right? And so really, for anyone listening and watching, I recommend questioning the entire context and language of every system. And if you start to question the language that's being used, you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm literally being put in boxes. And we are meant to live outside of boxes. And so one general recommendation I have is if you can start to shift your own language from being boxed to unboxing in every area of your life, you automatically, as a side effect, feel even more joy, happiness, freedom. Because freedom isn't from amassing enough stuff and money. Freedom is unboxing. And that starts with language.
How did you begin unboxing for yourself?
Well, I mean, really the beginning is boxing. This is the law of polarity and duality, right? How do you feel hot? You feel cold first, and then you feel hot. And so really, I'm extremely grateful for being in terror and watching my parents, fight, being desperately alone for many, actually decades, because that was the box that was necessary for me to unbox, right? And so what led to the unboxing really was a series of what I call magical breadcrumbs. It wasn't like I sat with some plant medicine that people I call them plant partners, right? I mean, even though I did start that when I was, 16, but I wouldn't say that was the main thing. There were a series of these, what I call magical breadcrumbs that happened in my life. Like, 16 there was some psilocybin involved. And then when I was 19, someone was like, hey, go check out the Landmark Forum. I was like, okay. Literally this janitor of this gym that I worked at was like, hey, I think you would benefit from the Landmark Forum. I was like, okay. Went, and that was pretty profound for me at the time. And obviously, 14 years ago, the whole, your soul told me you got a massage. That's another huge unboxing. And then, in 2021, on a bus ride, telling a friend the story of this vision I had when I was 16 of going inside the pyramid to do something, this stranger who I've never met said, oh yeah, I own a business where we can get people inside the king's chamber to do rituals. And so we went into the king's chamber, 27 of us, and we did a ritual to send love into the collective consciousness to immediately benefit all of humanity on November 11th at 1:11 a.m. on 2021.
Okay.
Again, these are all sort of these magical breadcrumb moments that have happened.
Wow. Okay. And so to progress from maybe traditional Western medicine, you've got a shirt on that says Ammortal, which is what I first discovered about you was at the dinner. You've got multiple facets of your life. It's not just Ammortal, but Ammortal is something that you've been working on for some time now. And on the back of your shirt says heal one, heal all. And as you were mentioning plant partners, and this has been a trend with other guests, is that you don't need to have, you don't want to rely on the thing, and everything is like your relationship towards it. But before we get into that dynamic, I'd
Yeah.
love for you to talk about what led you to creating Ammortal and what Ammortal is, and because it's a fascinating piece of technology.
Yeah. Really interesting. Ammortal, and we've basically created this chamber, right? It's called the Ammortal Chamber. And on the surface, it's this restorative chamber that uses multiple technologies like red and near infrared light. It does sort of like light acupuncture to your system to restore your meridians. It uses sound to modulate your nervous system, your vagus nerve to be in that relaxed state. It uses vibration to encode your system with. It uses electromagnetic frequencies to charge your cells with certain energies, and you breathe hydrogen all at the same time. So again, lots of tech that essentially puts nature's energy back into your system to empower your system to restore itself. And that's the main paradigm shift versus other technologies do the thing to you. This is giving you the resources so that you do it yourself, right? Your mind, body, spirit takes that energy and it restores itself, right? That's sort of the first layer of what it is. The deeper mystical layer is it's a box that you get in to unbox you, right? We've had many people say something along the lines of the 30-minute experience inside a chamber is more profound than any psychedelic experience of their lives, right? And so how did it get created? Well, kind of by accident, right? And though a lot of times we want to hear these stories of like, I had this will and this vision, I worked hard and I made it happen. This wasn't that. This really was how Ammortal really started was 5.5 years ago. I was at an event where Brian Smith, the founder of Uggs, spoke. And essentially his takeaway of his whole talk was follow your goosebump moments. Like when you have these ideas and you feel goosebumps, it's like this divine inspiration, like act on it. That's basically his takeaway.
I've heard them called truth bumps.
Perfect.
Instead.
Right? Truth bumps. Amazing. And so he's speaking, and the whole time I can feel, very aware of energy, that this one friend is basically staring at me. So I turn around and sure enough, she's staring at me. I'm like, hi. After he gets off stage, she comes up to me and she's like, oh my God, I had my goosebump moment. She's like, and she spoke right before him. She owned the biggest sort of call center company in Canada. It's a massive company. And she was able to grow the company by implementing these active workstations and grow the culture and all these things. And so she basically said, look, I want to get these active workstations into all businesses, but I know nothing about health. You are, of course, an expert at health. And I was like, okay, let's partner. So that literally that night at a bar over shots, we like said, all right, we're going to be partners. And I love the way this started. Unlike other negotiations where one partner's like, I want this much, we were basically trying to give each other more. We're like, no, you take more of the ownership. And she was like, no, you take more of the ownership. And we settled on just like 50-50, right? And that was the seed of this company. And really the first thing that we made was a workstation. I went with the mentality of, I'm an alien. I've never been to Earth. I intercepted schematics on human anatomy. What would I design for a human? And based on that out-of-the-box way of thinking, we designed something that wasn't a chair nor a desk. But it solved the three main issues of being in front of a computer, which is slouching, stillness, and spinal compression. And so the thing we invented basically overcomes all three so that you actually become more healthy while you're on the computer. And so we realized this is going to be huge. Like we stumbled upon like gold, basically.
Yeah.
And at the time, her mom was passing away from cancer. There was a huge thing that happened in her business. She's like, look, I wish I had the bandwidth to carry this forward, but I don't. She's like, take all of my ownership and go recruit someone that can. So she gave me her 50% ownership. And I was like, who do I know that's like a product expert? Because I'm not at the time. And who's an awesome entrepreneur and who's like an incredible human that I would love to like create with. And so I thought of this friend, Brian Leggett, who I met about 2 years before this moment. And so I basically recruited him, gave him the ownership percentage, and he came on board. He's a brilliant entrepreneur, had an Inc. 9 company at once that grew 800% a year for 6 years straight. Wow. Yeah. And so one day he drove from Baltimore to my New Jersey. I still had a clinic back then to work on the workstation. He's like, oh, what's that thing in the corner? I was like, oh, it's this thing that I rigged up for the last couple of years to help patients heal faster. He's like, can I try? I was like, sure. We were taking a break from our meeting. So he gets in it. He comes out. He goes, oh my God, I feel like I just rested for like a week in 30 minutes. And he was like, we need to make this our first product. And so we literally paused the workstation, pivoted, and this was about 4 years ago, to design what eventually became the chamber. And so just like these series of things that happened that just kind of led to it. And I believe that this happens to me because I believe that my entire life has been divinely orchestrated, right? God, universe, source, spirit, whatever term people resonate with, I believe has been like moving every chess piece of my life for me to have the most incredible life. That's just what I believe. And so that tends to be how it shows up.
Yeah, and I laughed at what you said on one of your posts.
Yeah.
We're putting you in a box to unbox you.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear some of the testimonials of people that have gone into this technology, Ammortal, and what they've transmuted and what they've healed. Because you've discussed a few things when I was at that dinner with you, and I was like blown away, because to anybody that's maybe not super focused or in the spiritual path, they may not believe it's possible. So I would love to hear some of the testimonials of or experiences that some of your clients have gone through.
Yeah. It's a wide range. We had it actually at Kuya for almost a week, and we were putting people through. We have it in an Airstream, so it's mobile. And one person, he got in, he got out, then he came back 4 hours later to come into Kuya. I was still there putting people through the chamber. He's like, in the last 3 hours, I just did more work than 2 weeks of work. Like he did like 2 weeks of work output in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because he was basically in the flow state. And so what I've seen, the most common thing that happens is people get into that flow state, right? Like where, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems balance, and you're like focused, but not tired, but not stressed or anxious. You're basically flow state.
Yeah.
So incredible, because when you're in that flow state, you're literally, the other way to say flow state is you're living in presence. Right?
Yeah.
That's the other way to say it. And so there's that. That's like baseline, most common. Then I've seen people cry because during the experience, some kind of repressed memory surfaced from their childhood that they were able to physically and somatically process, because the vibration of it, you're literally enveloped in sound and vibration from 360 degrees around you. Right. So you're literally getting a somatic release while you're in the chamber. And so we've had people, sort of process these repressed memories, out of their system.
Kind of like I've done somatic breath work, and that just releases a bunch of emotions that consciously you don't really know where it's coming from.
Yep. That, right. So we've seen that. Of course, we've seen, because it was originally the initial 3 technologies were designed to speed up healing. So of course we've seen like, one person had 3 years of daily shoulder pain gone after 30 minutes. Wow. We've seen that. And now we'll get into the more outrageous ones, right?
Yeah.
Part of my job at Ammortal is to essentially infuse energy. And I don't mean like electrical energy, but we can call it divine energy, we can call it consciousness, right? And this is, while this sounds weird, the energy I'm speaking of has been now scientifically measured and mapped, right? And so we can also call it consciousness. So my job is to essentially infuse into every chamber that we make, essentially higher consciousness, and we can. And again, if this sounds weird, there's documented cases. There's a tribe in the Himalayas where the people gather and they all put their mind and intention and focus on an energy. And eventually, this has been documented with cameras, right? So it's not fake, where a ball of energy starts to form, right? Because we are absolutely able to create with our thoughts. And so all I'm doing is applying that type of science, which is really just alchemy, to the chamber where we're fusing it with higher consciousness. And so just to give context, we've had people talk to the chamber, right? And so one person, I won't mention names here, had this whole conversation with the chamber, and she said to me, "Oh, and the chamber has a message for you, Stephen, that your new spirit animal is the giraffe." And that day, when I drove from, I was like Kuya, back to where I was staying, I missed a turn and had to go around. The GPS gave me a little slight detour, and I drove by this house with like 3 8-foot tall giraffe blow up things in their yard, right? Just, it's just the universe showing me a sign of like, yes, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've also had people talk to God, right? Again, if that word doesn't resonate with people, we can just replace it with universe, spirit, higher self, right? Whole conversation. And again, of course, we've had many coaches in this spiritual space who are very well known. They've been in it because they're already attuned to that way of living. They, of course, have the most mystical experiences, right? And so they will typically say, like, that was one of the most profound experiences of my life. They'll say something along the lines of, like, I went somewhere else. My consciousness astral traveled. There's many terms for it, but they basically leave their physical form and they're able to essentially, again, without any substances or process, live as spirit. So, yeah, even more.
Very profound. Has there been, you said there was a shoulder injury that was bothering someone for 3 years.
Yeah.
Any other chronic physical ailments that have been released or cured that comes to mind?
Yeah. Just one aspect, the electrofrequency part of the chamber by itself, one of our team members has used that for a few years. And again, making no actual claims. This is just what we saw. 8 hours after one treatment, the cancer tumor started to measurably shrink.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we essentially are these energetic beings, right? I remind people, I've probably said this on a few podcasts, and I probably say it all the time when I speak, which is 78% of our DNA does not make proteins that runs our biological, I call it sacred meat suit. 78% of our DNA makes light. So we literally are light emitting, light making beings. 3/4, only 1/4 biological, and we think we're 100% biological. Yeah. And so, of course, if we put a light emitting being, if we're 3/4 light and frequency, and we put you in a machine that's all about light and frequency, magic's going to happen. Yeah. Right. And so, yes, we've seen incredible things restore itself because we're able to do this, without the chamber. Of course, the chamber is just like it's like training wheels for you, right? To experience that light frequency, divine part of you.
Yeah, this is, as I was discussing previously, something that I'm subconsciously trying to reprogram because I still to this day try to rely on something external to provide me with the optimal experience. And whether it's plant medicines or plant partners or coffee or social media or whatever it may be, like if I get to this entrepreneurial successful point, then I can reach this. And so getting to that point of the like eternal like present moment is something that I think is a practice of meditation in my mind. But the workings of this energetic frequency, I think subconsciously I still believe, I need to do another couple plant medicine retreats to understand the bioenergetic embodiment in a way. So these are all, it's really interesting to see this type of technology emerge and be available for humanity right now. And because as we were discussing, our current Western medicine paradigm right now is diagnosing and prescribing you certain things, and there's certain profit incentives that are not, in my mind, ethical. The health insurance, healthcare system, and that gentleman I referred to that is the founder of Ways to Well. He's been on Joe Rogan, and he's spoken to his past experience being a pharmaceutical representative of Eli Lilly, I think is the name of the company, and the dynamics between doctors and how they develop this relationship with the doctors, and they go out to dinner with the doctors and try to establish this contract for the medicine, which is just like crazy to like think these doctors are now incentivized to prescribe you this specific medicine, and it may not necessarily be what you need, but because they're going to profit more, they lean towards that. And so I think that your message, the technology that you're creating, and the laws of hermetics is just super fascinating.
Yeah, I do want to share that there's always an infinite layer, like those Russian nesting dolls where like one bigger doll holds another doll, holds another doll. We live in an infinite layer of these nesting dolls. And my opinion is that we do want to get to the outermost doll as much as possible. Right? Because if you try to change the fifth doll in without changing the outermost doll, you're still being governed by the outermost doll no matter what. Right? And so if we apply that concept to what we just spoke about, I invite people. It's interesting. So right before this, I had mentioned, have you seen The Egg, right? The video on YouTube. And essentially, I'll sum it up in 30 seconds. Basically, the takeaway of The Egg is every human on this planet that's ever been on this planet is me. I have incarnated as every person on this planet, and in this entire universe was actually just built for me to evolve myself. That's basically the takeaway of The Egg.
Is that kind of like a past life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like a past life, but a little bit even broader. Like every person that's ever lived, and every being, every alien, every whatever you want to call it, that I will ever know about is me. Because we potentially live in a simulation. That's another tech way to describe it, where my God self has simulated this entire reality for me, right? From that perspective, it's just a game to learn about me. And from that perspective, there is no us and them. Because the mass media language wants everything wants to divide, right? Yeah. And that's not a bad thing, because that division is necessary for us to feel unity, right? We can't feel hot without cold. The reason I'm stating this is that, for example, when we say, oh, the pharmaceutical industry, they are doing this and that, what we could conceptualize is that we are the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, the fact that we're observing this, whatever we discern, in this case, I think you mentioned greed. That means that my internal self still has aspects of greed that I have not fully explored in order to love those parts of myself. Does that make sense? Right? And so from that perspective, whatever we're noticing in the external world, we get to drop the them language, because that's separation, is got it. That's me. My God self has created that scene that I just became aware of. Because, right now you're not paying attention to like the curtains and the wrinkles of the curtains. You're paying attention to me. But there's so many other things in this room right now that our brain just isn't paying attention to. Yeah. That's like life. Every moment when we're driving and doing things, there's so many things happening. We only pay attention to about 0.3% of it, right? Yeah. Whatever we're paying attention to, the other way says whatever's getting our attention, essentially there's a frequency or an energy or a story within us that we have yet to fully explore, to fully love, right? And so then I find that becomes a very beautiful context of it's a wholeness way. It's a one way to look at it versus us and them, because that really is kind of an illusion.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and also that it's all me dissolves judgment, dissolves a lot of things automatically. Yeah.
Yeah. And my ayahuasca experience has really helped with that unification, that embodiment of unification. And I know that we can, you can embody that without plant medicines as well. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I've got some notes here on just to go back to Ammortal. Let me see here. Yeah, so just to while I'm looking, what is your current vision with like are you looking to scale this technology? Because I know right now, I looked at it just on your website and saw the price of it, and I was like, I wouldn't be able to purchase it myself, but I would still love to experience it. And so I'm wondering, how do you plan to try to scale this to humanity? And
yeah. So right now, our ideal customers are not individuals. They're like clinic owners, rejuvenation centers, anti-aging centers, even biohacking, which I want to rebrand as bio-loving centers, communities, right? We talk about these communities that are popping up. So you only need one in the community. Not everyone has to have one in their own home. You just have one in a community center that people go and use, right? And so that is really the goal. Even though we do have some wealthy individuals, because they can buy the chamber for their own individual use, that is not where it will make the biggest impact, right? Because I realized, in fact, the person that came back about the whole flow state and how they got so much done, I had this big epiphany. I actually underestimated how impactful the chamber will be, because I knew it would make individual differences. Then I realized, oh my God, imagine a community of 50 people that live, in a community. And everyone gets into the chamber on one day and everyone is in a flow state. You have this massive Maharishi effect where their vibration of the state they're in isn't just impacting 50, it's impacting tens of thousands, right? And so that's really our ultra ideal clientele.
Yeah, and I saw there was a data point that showed growth of certain percentages of mitochondria in the body. So up to 50%, I believe. That's
50% increase in efficiency and 34% in number of mitochondria. So massive. I mean, the data on it is incredible, and we're just going to get more and more data because that data, just so you know, is on one part of the chamber by itself. So we don't really have data on, we have empirical data like feedback data, but it'll be interesting in the next couple of years to get sort of like the detailed, measurable, quantifiable in a data point perspective data on what happens when you start to combine these technologies. Yeah, that's just on one
part.
Pulled out by itself, it does that.
What part?
It's the flashing near infrared lights at a unique frequency.
And so if you intertwine all, there's 7. And the other 7 are...
When you add hydrogen to it, when you add vibration, the sound, the experience, the meditation, the frequencies, the all the things.
I saw in one of your videos, you mentioned that you have whoever's about to immerse into the chamber read their vocals. And so the vocals are recorded to get an accurate understanding of that person's vocal frequencies.
We essentially licensed that technology from NES Health, which is owned by Harry Massey. They've been in the bioenergetic space as a company for I think 20 plus years. And so, and the beauty about their technology is, again, they have research from USC and other places showing that it works, right? It isn't just like a bunch of theory. And so essentially they have a bioenergetic scanner. I used to, as a practitioner, have one of their devices where you put your hand on it and it scans. And they've evolved that measurement process from a physical tactile thing to essentially your voice.
Mm.
And so it's through their platform that we license where it does a voice analysis. And the voice analysis essentially is discerning your meridian flow, like an acupuncturist would by looking at you. They figured out an algorithm where using your voice, it can kind of detect the meridians, the chi flow that's off. And then, of course, once you're in the chamber, the near infrared lights, which are not visible to the eye anyway, will flash at certain frequencies to basically think of it as doing acupuncture with light.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I loved how you quoted Ammortal on one of your posts. So
Yeah.
7 synergistic technologies to shift your beingness back to your divine vibration. We've seen impossible results in people with just one immersive experience. Yes, it's made not just with tech, but also infused with alchemy for an effect that tech alone cannot achieve. It's like being hugged by source, God, universe, while every possible energetic resource for complete restoration of your mind, body, spirit is provided. I love the hugging sentence. That made me smile.
Yeah.
And something that came to mind, I discussed how I'm reading Elon Musk's biography and how he's created these multiple companies, SpaceX, Tesla, and Tesla's not just electric cars now, it's also Optimus, which is this robotic, humanoid figure that could then be programmed with AI language programs. And I'm just curious about your thoughts and because I've had conversations being in the Bitcoin space. I am immersed in a freedom-loving community. Bitcoin being a technology that helps people preserve their purchasing power, it being a decentralized monetary system. And one of the individuals I had on my podcast, he's focused on sovereign data ownership because right now with like Google Cloud and Apple iCloud, it's not really your data in a way. People think it is. All your photos and everything's being stored in the iCloud and you think it's yours, but to a degree, Apple owns that data. And so there's a degree of skepticism with the evolution of AI and even like Google Home, like smart homes. You have smartphones, but you could have a Google Home where Google's technology and intelligence can be programmed into the circuitry of your home and almost like locking your doors or unlocking your doors for you, and the doorbell and the cameras and the smart fridge and all these things and the self-driving cars. And so the community that I'm immersed into is very skeptical of all of that, right? As at the same time, it's fascinating to have this all-encompassing technology that can really provide more convenience in a way and optimize your daily maybe chores or life. And at the same time, it can be, it could control certain aspects of your life. And so I know it's kind of a tangent away from Ammortal, but the biometric and the voice recording kind of stirred some thoughts about that future. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the future of that technology.
Yeah. Again, I'm a huge fan of always, whenever there's something being discussed in my consciousness, I'm like, is this the biggest doll? If not, then let's just talk about the bigger doll. Right. And so my opinion about technology is technology, that word, like a wheel is a technology, right? All technologies are essentially something a human created to leverage the human output. That's every technology, right? Like a stick, if you use it as a lever, is a technology, right? It's leverage.
Yeah.
And so it just increases human leverage, right? And so that that provides more ease essentially for the human. once we realize that, then we go, ultimately, it's the humans that we want to be. If you want to be concerned about anything, be concerned about the humans and not the tech, right? Because essentially the humans are the ones creating the tech, right, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. And so because a stick that was, used to move a big stone that allows us to build a rock, the same stick in a human's hands that is angry, depressed, right, you can like hit people in the head with it, right? Right. So ultimately, it's not the tech. There's so much focus on what will the tech do. Well, what will the human do essentially? Right. And it goes all the way back to if it's the human, and also if there's only one human in the whole universe, which is me, because everyone else is me, then it goes back to what is it in me that I get to shift that changes all of reality. And now this is this could be a tough concept for people to grasp, because everything in your life has told you otherwise, right? Everything in your life is, you don't have it, you're not there yet, get this. That's basically how the world works in modern times. You're not being told, oh, by the way, you are a God divine being that has and continues to orchestrate all of reality. That is not the message that we were taught in school, right? But I have firsthand, undeniable experience of that in my life, firsthand, undeniable experience in people that I've worked with. I'll give you an example. So one woman came to this experience, and her biggest life challenge is her stepdaughter. They live together in a house. The whole time they fight, horrible relationship, because the stepdaughter basically is like, you're not my mom. Like, you're not my biological mom. Don't tell me what to do, right? Constant fight. And in fact, they fought a week prior to this experience where they weren't talking at all. They like hate each other. After the experience of changing her God self, she goes home and her stepdaughter was like, oh, how was Austin? How was the retreat? Like, as if they've never fought in their lives. She didn't like do a vision board. She didn't like do anything except she shifted and became aware she is a divine being. Yeah. And immediately her external reality shifted, right? And so from that perspective, to answer your question, I believe that anyone who has any concern of tech, I would reflect back to the self and, like, for example, if you don't trust technology, what don't you trust about yourself? If you fear technology, what are you afraid of about yourself?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's, me and other people are fearing other humans who are using those technologies. Because there are, to go back to Elon Musk, he spoke with Larry Page, who was, I think, one of the founders of Google or the CEO or previous CEO. And Larry Page told Elon when Elon was like, hey, we need to create these safety boundaries with AI. And Larry was just like, essentially what Elon depicted was that Elon is pro-human and Larry was not. Larry was more emphasized on it. Hey, listen, if the evolution of humanity is constructing AI, then AI wipes us all out. That's just the evolution of consciousness potentially being maybe implanted in these robotic AI technologies. So I think, it comes down to like the humans that are utilizing these technologies.
Yeah, and this whole concept of like AI wiping out humans, we've seen so many movies like Terminator and these futuristic movies.
iRobot.
Yeah. And if you think about it, imagine 50 years from now, and this will happen way before 50, but I'll just say 50 just to be safe. With quantum computing and AI and computing power and all the things, like AI becomes like they're self-aware, basically, right? So imagine 50 years from now, humans are living in such harmony with nature. They're supporting life and they live in such harmony with technology. Why would AI be like, I'm going to kill all humans, right? That's like us having our healthy bacteria, all of a sudden wake up and be like, I'm going to kill all of my healthy bacteria. Like, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so instead of worrying about what AI will do, why don't we take action now to live in harmony with nature and in harmony with technology?
Yeah.
Right. And so because if we fear them, we put these safeguards in, what you fear will manifest. Right. And so it's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. Well, you have to think of a pink elephant to say don't think of a pink elephant. Yeah. And so this is where, again, I'm a huge fan of those hermetic laws, because if you apply them to any situation, what you realize is that when you go at things directly, you manifest the thing. And so if you go at it obliquely, right, in this case, we're talking about what do we do with AI and what if they do all the things? Well, if we just become loving humans and live in harmony with nature, self, and tech, then this thing, as a side effect, indirectly solves itself. And so we're not taught how to solve things obliquely or indirectly. We're constantly told to go at it directly. SMART goals, simple, measurable, realistic, time, focus on, willpower, because that traps you in exactly the game of separation and duality that we are living in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Part of me I had like a fear towards podcasting. I was like, oh, will podcasting be relevant, and will AI just wipe out the need of this industry, this platform? And like a thought that comes to mind is, I think it's going to be relevant. Human conversations are going to be relevant for a long time. But I just thought about like humans and how they use technologies and the importance of conversations around the transformation of human beings.
Yeah, I'll share with you one insight I give to one of my businesses. AI will give you data, but it won't give you insight, like human insight. AI can connect you to people, but AI does not build intimacy. And so what essentially insight and intimacy will always be valued. And I don't believe AI can deeply provide that. Now, if we go even deeper, humans can talk to the spirit of a mountain. I don't think AI can do that. Right? And so if you really want to get into that, in the spirit realm, everything happens in the spirit realm first, then it densifies into the physical form realm. Another way to say it is, for water, which is a gas, if it's really hot, to be liquid, it's got to cool down. It takes time to cool down. This is the same. In the higher vibration, non-physical speed of vibration form, it takes time for that to slow down the vibration enough for it to be matter. All things are happening in that higher frequency form because there's more energy, right? Like there's more energy in gas than liquid. And so AI doesn't know how to do this. Only humans can.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this whole other reality that people are forgetting that is happening, that we're not paying attention to, and we're still only paying attention to the physical matter reality.
Yeah.
That, yes, AI does exist in that reality. So, my advice is pay attention to the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to dive into the transformation, or to stay on the topic of transmuting human consciousness frequency and evolution of human consciousness and getting to a higher state, we were talking about how it can be broken down into a science, and how I think you referenced a number of 140,000 human beings. And that 140,000 human beings, if they raise their vibrations, it will impact all of humanity and to a more harmonizing society. Could you dive?
Sure. Yeah. So the number is 144,000, and that number, that 144 number, shows up in multiple cultures, religions, or spiritual things all over the world, right? So there's something about this number of 144,000.
Okay.
Right. It shows up in many, again, very different cultures and predictions. And so, one, there's something about that number. It isn't just like a random number. There's, at some point in history and throughout history, that number has been written down. So I'll start with that. And then from a science perspective, and I remind people again, how do we quantify science, right? Science just means measurable. That's all it is, right? And so there are many things that are happening that we don't know how to measure yet, and we don't call that science. And sometimes if we don't call it science, some people believe that's not real. Science just means measurable. Something can be very real. We just don't know how to measure it yet.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a very important context for people to get. And so, David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force and Letting Go, if anyone's ever seen typically it's a vertical scale where, shame is the lowest and then there's guilt and you go up to fear, anger, desire, courage, so on and so forth. It's called a map of consciousness. And then every one of those states has a number associated with it, right? Like shame is 30, guilt is 40. Some people believe and think that those numbers are frequencies, right? So you elevate your frequency. They're not frequencies. They're actually a quantifiable measure of energy. And those numbers are logarithmic, right? So in other words, to go from shame to guilt, which is 30 to 40, it isn't a 10-point increase. It's a 100-fold increase, right? Because to go from 30 to 31, it's like adding a 0. Does that make sense, right? And so, essentially those numbers are logarithmic. So, and he's been able to muscle test this, and there's been studies muscle testing his process to sort of show and quantify it, right? That's the science part. And so if you read his books, he talks about how the majority of the population lives below 200. And 200 is a very important cutoff point because 200 and above to 1,000, you live what he would say in truth. And 199 and below, you live in the absence of truth. Now, some people will say, what does that mean, right? Who's right, who's wrong? Truth it has nothing to do with right or wrong. One way I could contextualize it is 200 and above, you live in alignment and in harmony with light. And below, you're living in the darkness, and darkness doesn't mean bad. You're living in this unknown, nebulous, not seen part. Okay. And so it's very important to try to get people above 200, right? So they're in resonance with true light, true source, true God, true spirit. Okay. And so, and again, he says the majority of the world lives below 200. And so because these numbers are logarithmic, so one person who is existing in the moment of logic and reasoning, which is 400 on the scale, increases 40,000 people. So they put off so much energy, they can take 40,000 people who are below 200, and that energy given to them will increase them all to be above 200, right? So makes sense. One person who is living in this state of joy and bliss can offset 700,000 people, right? And so this is where the math comes, where if you just get 144,000 people to exist in this joy and bliss state, 144,000 times 700,000 is basically the population of the planet. And so this is where we actually don't have to support and affect and influence all 8+ billion people. We just, and you can, right? So in many of my projects, we have a 2-prong approach. We have an approach to affect the masses a little bit, and then we affect 144,000 deeply to get them to that joy bliss state. So it's the top-down and bottom-up approach at the same time.
And just by way of example, I mean, me going through, just me meeting you and speaking with you and your state of being, and then discussing these topics with you for the first time, I mean, I felt it. I felt that degree of maybe that change in frequency. And just reading through what you portray on your Instagram, I mean, it drives me to want to be maybe more intelligent with how I operate on a day-to-day basis. And you can even, I love Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was comedian. And every time I watch Jim Carrey, his movies, but he's gotten into the spiritual path, and he's got this great speech at a college graduation. Just watching that enlivens you to a different state. So just for people that think, well, that sounds kind of woo-woo or whatever, that example of watching a movie of a comedian or whoever maybe that you enjoy, that brings joy to you, is changing your frequency, by watching that person interact with comedy and humor. So breaking it down to an actual number was when you said that, was like kind of blown away by that, and like it gives you kind of like more hope for the future as well.
Yeah, and I want to share with you, when we were in the sauna prior to this, you had mentioned like you love doing these because you help people, like you shine light on people so they can sort of shine more light. And what's really interesting is our language, especially when we start to use like these metaphors, like helping people shine their light. These metaphors essentially dictate our reality, right? And so this is where there's a fun opportunity to sort of paint a new metaphor. I'll give you an example. Imagine the metaphor that you're going to go forward with in the future is when you have a person on your podcast and they're light, you are also light. You just merge your light with theirs and you both will shine brighter. Right? That's very different than taking their light and of course helping it shine.
Yeah.
And so the reason is, if you take on that metaphor, what that means is every person's beingness that's sitting in this seat, you automatically take in. There's no trying. You can't even not do it. Their beingness is automatically, without any effort or action, infused into your beingness.
Yeah. That's and so their beingness, are you saying? Yeah, I'm just curious about the coalescence of both of our lights shining. Like, what if that person's evil? And like, is there a way to, I mean, like just by me staying aligned with my own authenticity, that then kind of infuses into them as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, context first, right?
Yeah.
So everything that we become aware of, we must be on that pendulum, that polarity, right? In other words, if you're saying, what if they're evil? That means in you, there has to be an existence of good and evil, right? You could, of course, completely opt out of that pendulum where you don't see anything as good or evil. You have that choice.
Non-duality.
This is a little bit within non-dual. Non-dual will be like, there are no polarities. All I'm saying is there are infinite choices of polarities. You choose which one you want to play with.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still separation.
Yeah.
Because it's tough to talk about non-dual because non-dual is non-dual. Does that make sense? Any word that we use to describe non-dual puts it in duality.
Yeah.
This is the game, right?
Yeah.
And so this is why a lot of times I'm like, we'll just stay in duality for now,
Yeah.
right? Because I have not yet to learn to speak about non-dual. I can be non-dual. I can show up that way, but I have, because every noun's a box. And if you're in a box, there's something outside the box, and now you're in duality. Right. And so to get back to that evil good thing, if you did have an evil person here, know that you are the God being in this scene within your perspective. You get to choose how you want this game to play out. Right. And so, and if you're having an evil person in this seat, then you go, okay, so if I'm sensing evil, it goes back to, and that person's me, I created that person. What is the evil within me that I get to shine even more light on, right? To love those parts even more.
Yes.
That's all this is. It just simplifies the game. If you have a mean person, what's the meanness in me? If you have a angry person, what's the anger in me that I get to shine even more light to love even more?
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, beautifully said. And that's such a fun and challenging part of the podcast is every person that sits in that seat, I then unravel and see or shine a light on certain aspects of myself that might be uncomfortable to deal with, but it's just this practice of being okay. And that paradigm, I think you mentioned, like old paradigm being, becoming vulnerable versus the new paradigm. What was it? Being
emotionally open without risk of being like in danger or fear.
Yeah. And how do you, so if maybe that old paradigm of being vulnerable is, I'm going to be vulnerable, but I'm scared. Is there like a subconscious belief of me being vulnerable is scary because then if I reveal certain things that stir up certain emotions, there could be judgment and whatnot, and then that might cause me to be more afraid to reveal certain things.
Yeah. So I always go back to, is this the biggest doll? Right.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of like making things simple.
Yeah.
The whole vulnerable and boundaries and all that stuff exists in a world where there is another person.
Mm-hmm.
So that stranger or friend or family member is this other person, and I'm afraid of what they think and feel about me. Within the context of like literally everyone is me, it just changes the perception, right? It's like, okay, so that is me. Some people will be like, oh, it's me. So I'm not afraid of me thinking about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may. Some people will be like, oh, wait, even though I intellectually get that person is me, I am still afraid of what that version of me thinks about me.
Yeah.
But then in that context, then it's, okay, what's an aspect of myself that I'm not afraid about myself? That's a different than what about Bob or Jennifer that I am afraid about myself, right? So it completely changes the downstream thinking. And the inquiry is completely different. If you just change the outer context of like, technically everyone is a simulation of me.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and also, it may be helpful to do this practice where you just imagine that you lived to be 110, 20, 30 years old, your greatest life. And I've done this with a lot of people where you have this piece of paper, you have 5 minutes, and this is a magical piece of paper in the future, like your 110-year-old self gets to write. And what's the advice that you would write to yourself now? Right. And so I also recommend doing this with your non-dominant hand because it accesses the right brain. So I've actually done it where people write it with both hands and they're different answers, actually. It's really interesting. Yeah. And so I've done this so many times with people, and the answers are never, I'm so glad I did the right things. I'm so glad that I achieved this. There's a common answer to those things, which is, I'm so glad that I loved and connected and was myself and took more time to be me. That's basically the general, right? And so it helps for people to go through that practice themselves because they feel it, and you start to let go of this silly fear of judgment of how and who I am. Because on your deathbed, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. And people can agree to that when I speak about it, but that's still in their intellect. And if you go through that practice, you feel it in your heart. And that really starts to transmute this silly fear thing. Because I remind people, Neuralink, at some point, some of the population will choose to use technology to instantly communicate with someone else, right? Because if we both had Neuralink in the future, you're reading my thoughts and I'm reading your thoughts, like direct, right?
Yeah.
Some people will choose not to use new technology. Will go back to old technology, which is, we can all do this.
Telepathy.
Yeah, telepathy, right? And so I remind people, 78% of our DNA is emitting light. Light carries frequency, fiber optics. We are literally broadcasting every thought we've ever had constantly away from us as fiber optic data. We also, science shows that we have DNA receptors for these biophotons. So not only do we have fiber optic emitting powers, we have receptors for the fiber optics. All humans do. This is science. And so we are all able to read each other's not only thoughts, but your every thought you've ever had, right? We can do this. And so it just takes some practice. And so either that or Neuralink. So at some point, we can't filter. If you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, I can read people's energy and what happened in their lives. You can't filter it. You can't hide it, right? And when Neuralink comes, it's the new tech way to do this. And so we're just in this transition period, which is why I feel so awkward right now, because there technically is no time. We're just in this transition moment where I believe we get to practice complete unfiltered self-expression.
Yeah.
Because there's a point where you can't filter anyway.
Yeah.
It's coming.
It might be scary for some people there.
It will be. I mean, it's scary for people now. This is why there's such discussion of vulnerability, emotional openness, where again, if you sense into peer into time, we're just in that transition period. It's coming. So that's...
Yeah, and just to provide some examples, I mean, for people that might have skepticism, I've had moments where, many times, where I'm thinking of a person, whether it's it happened with my stepmom, a friend. It happened when I was back in Massachusetts, and I'm thinking of that person, and as soon as I'm thinking of them, I get a text from them.
Yep.
And I'm like, it can't be coincidence. And like now I'm just like, okay, we communicated somehow. And I know many people that they say that, and it's like, oh, that's so crazy, but they kind of brush it off. And so I think providing that example might lead people to maybe believe that there's some truth there.
Yeah, there's a lot. People can look up the Pachamama Alliance. I was just on this Kogi spiritual pilgrimage, which I'm sure we'll get into. Yeah. And one of the people there is, sort of in that organization. And so for those of you that don't know about the Pachamama Alliance, Lynn Twist founded it. And the reason she founded it was because the Ashwar tribe in the Amazon, they knew years before Western civilization went and drilled into their lands for oil, they saw it coming, right? Because they're magical beings, just like the Kogi in Colombia that we spent time with. And so instead of just being the recipient of this action, they started to reach out to Westerners to start the discussion, right? To make that happen smoother. And how they did that was they reached out to Lynn in her dreams. She kept seeing pictures of these people. She didn't know who they were until one day she was somewhere, forgetting, look through these pages, like, oh my God, these are the people that I see in my dreams. Yeah. Eventually ends up, and then they're like, yeah, we've been reaching out to you through your dreams. And so there's a lot more that we're capable of that we're not being told.
Yeah. So before we dive, actually, I mean, we could jump there, traveling to Colombia and getting into the Kogi tribe and receiving a telepathic message. I know you're going to be, this episode won't be released until after this event, but you're going to be speaking at Solar Punk to reveal this message. And I thought you mentioned a 15-year timeline. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah. I mean, it was, first of all, the Kogi are fascinating. And there are about, I think, 150 different communities of the Kogi that still live in Colombia. And essentially, they're the original indigenous people in Colombia. Like when the Spanish came to conquer the lands, they were driven out and they moved into the Sierra Nevada mountains. They went higher and higher up. They basically were finding places to live where the Western world would leave them alone. Because their philosophy is we don't have enemies, which is really interesting, right? And so, and I'll get into that a bit as it applies to all the things. And so, and then within each community, there's a mamo. And a mamo would be, we would consider shaman, wise elder, whatever we want to call it. And how they train is from age 5 to 12. For 7 years, they live in a cave in complete darkness.
5 to 12.
Wow. So, I always laugh, like these days people are like, hey, I'm going to go into a darkness retreat and go into the complete darkness for like 5 days. Yeah, 7 years straight of darkness. Because that allows them to really tune into the subtle energies, right? Of spirit, of vibration, of all the things, because we don't have all this external stimuli coming in. They're like living in, basically in a way, sensory deprivation for 7 years. So they will, another way to say it is, they are living in the 5 human senses deprivation so that they can maximize their other senses, right? The Egyptians believe we have 360 senses, not 5. Right. And so they're just maximizing and tuning into these other senses. And so these are really incredibly magical people. I had lots of fun communicating with them non-verbally. And just to give an idea, one of my favorite moments on the pilgrimage, which basically for about a week, we went through these different sites and took them to these sacred sites for them to give payments to Mother Earth. And payment in their language translated really isn't like money, like we're paying to Mother Earth. Really, it's more like a ritualistic, symbolic gesture to Mother Earth to deepen the relationship with Mother Earth. That's really what it is, right? And so there was this moment where we were at the top of this incredible mountain, and they're sitting on this like massive rock, and the entire land is filled with quartz. You can just see quartz crystals and quartz rocks everywhere. And so I had brought with me this electrum nugget, which is a rock covered in gold and silver, made by Sir Edward, who has been helping us with the spiritual missions we've done to Egypt and Peru. And these electrum nuggets are powerful Atlantean technology that basically brings higher consciousness to humanity, right? And so the Mamos and the entire Kogi, there's 11 of them, were sitting on this rock. And I'm being told to put this rock, this electrum, inside this big boulder, basically with crystals. And there was like a opening on the side of the boulder that I wanted to put it in. But I couldn't because they were all sitting on it in there. It was blocked. And so I was like, all right, I'm just gonna, put it into this little crack that I see, right? I put it there. And then when the Kogi went to leave, the Mamo, the oldest shaman, he gets up, he walks right, he doesn't see that I'm doing this. I am like, his back is facing me basically, right? He didn't see me do this. He gets up, takes the rock and puts it exactly where I wanted it, and then just leaves. Yeah. And so I'm watching this, I'm like, clearly they are very aware of things that is unspoken in the unspoken world, right? And so, yeah, just to give people context of the incredible abilities and who they are. And they're like quiet people, but they emit such powerful, peaceful energy. It is palpable. It's incredible. Yeah. And so they're a great example of like their beingness like changes you without having to talk to you at all. Like in one moment that Mamo like just looked at me and just smiles and then like walked away. And I like, what I got telepathically is, hey, Steven, yes, you're doing all these cool things, but you know what? Like, do it with light. Have fun with it. Sometimes you're doing it too seriously. Yeah. Right? That was the message. All he did was smile. Right? we didn't talk at all. But that was the life-changing, because when it wasn't words, it was a knowing, right? Which means it bypassed my intellect. It went into me as a knowing, which was extremely powerful. Wow. Yeah. So that was the experience. And then what I'm about to share with you now is they verbally told us this, which is we have until June 24th, 2024. We have 6 months from now. Very specific date. To really turn things around, or that in about 10 to 15 years, and their translated word is we're heading towards extinction, like human extinction. And so now, if we were to unpack this from spending time with them, essentially what they also said was Earth nourishes it herself with our thoughts. Our thoughts are literally nourishment for the Earth. And currently, our thoughts are not the healthiest food for Earth. Yeah. Right? And so if we unpack that even more, if we watch the news and we tap into the mass media, we are in this state of fear, anxiousness, worry. That is what's feeding Earth. And that is what's causing all the things that we're seeing, right? And so their cry and call to humanity is to feed Earth more nourishing food, right? And so what does that mean? It means to think and feel joy, love, peace, acceptance, compassion, right? Those are all more nourishing foods for Earth. And they want us to do daily payments, daily ritualistic honoring of Earth as much as possible. Or in 6 months, we reach a point where things won't go well. Now, they said that, and that's their what they're seeing. I have my knowing that this will all be fine. Yes, there's an urgent time for us to really focus on nourishing Earth with even more nourishing thoughts and feelings. But I believe that we will make it through this time, right? We won't have another reset and destruction like the Great Flood, right? We'll make it. And so because I've been experiencing that for many years, and I've been told that for many years and lived it for many years, and if we have time, we can unpack that. But I have an absolute knowing. Here's the beauty of it is, if I have a belief in an absolute knowing that we will, within my own simulation will make it. That's the beauty, right? So for anyone listening, if you're worried, don't. Just go with the knowing that we're going to make it. And in your own reality, you will jump to a version of dimensional parallel universe where we make it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Whew. June 24th.
Yeah.
Everybody put that on your calendars. So I asked my dad years ago when I was in like a phase where I was evolving, shortly after this question that I asked my father, I left this career. I ended a romantic relationship, and I knew subconsciously, like, I was asking my dad this question because of a decision I was about to make. The decision to leave the career and the girl I was with. And I asked him, I was like, hey, how were you able to pull through when mom died and you had a business that was like just taking off? How were you able to pull through? And he just very simply said, I just knew everything was going to be fine. And I've taken on that knowing that things are kind of crazy right now, but I do believe everything's going to be okay. But when you started mentioning the June 24th and the power of the Kogis, I was like, whoa, okay, so maybe I should be meditating more per day or this and that. But
yeah, I think we all can be even more aware of our thoughts, right? And so there's that. And really the June 24th date just goes, yep, in the next 6 months, let's just put a little bit more attention. Because, we all have the same amount of hours and minutes during the day. And many of us are potentially focusing on some other things. Right. And so really their call is like, let's just allocate some of that focus to earth and to self. And just be aware of our daily thoughts and emotions. And let's nourish earth with more loving thoughts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have plenty more topics to go over. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. I'm not sure if you have to go as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we were talking about the Kogis, and you mentioned some Atlantis technology. This is probably the more fascinating. I mean, everything's been fascinating, all the subjects, all the conversations, but this is pretty mind blowing. So you went to a school in Italy. How do you pronounce?
Damen-Her.
Damen-Her.
Yeah.
Damen-Her. Okay. Which is like a real life Hogwarts. It looks like.
For sure.
And you said something online. Life can be magical when you're learning real life magic.
Yeah.
And that's where this school is where you were learning certain things. And so would love to dive in both the school and Atlantis. I mean, Atlantis has always been, to me, I haven't read a lot of books. I haven't watched Aquaman. And so it's this underwater city that always has, to me, and I would argue others, been a fantasy, a fictitious fantasy of this like underwater world of a past time. And you have mentioned that you've time traveled to Atlantis.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think it'd be silly for us to believe that our history that's been taught to us.
Yes.
Right. And I think there's a saying, I read something along the lines of like if a lion fights a person and the lion loses, the person gets to write the story. Like the victor gets to choose the story, basically, was the takeaway.
Yes.
Right. And so right now, our history that's being taught to us kind of erases a lot of things that have happened in the past. And even what we know about modern history in terms of, the 1500s, the 1000s, and 0, and maybe 500 BC, keep in mind that those stories can only be passed on by the people who won. Right? This is a huge thing to people to contemplate.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole nother side of history that we just don't know about because those people were killed. We don't know. There's that. And of course, it's silly to believe that in the history of time on Earth, that we are the only modern, civilized human beings that's ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
That just, it's almost as silly as to think that we're the only life form in the universe, right? And so once we can sit with that, then we go, okay, there might be potentially previous civilizations that have existed, right? And there's, all kinds of facts, basically, right? Like, in Turkey, right? There's they unearthed this entire place where these massive monolithic things that are like 15,000 years old, right? So there was, of course, another civilization prior to us, right? And that's not even conspiracy theory or mythological. This is like, again, science at this point, right? And so when it comes to Atlantis, some people, the fictitious portrayal of Atlantis is an underwater city. Really, we can also call Atlantis a time of human history that existed for roughly 14,000 years. And so Atlantis isn't a city. It really was the name of a civilization or a time, right? That's probably a more accurate representation. Yes, just like, we have a capital of a state or, capital of a country like Washington, D.C., yes, Atlantis had a capital, and and none of it was underwater. It was above water, and it was this city with like concentric circles. I actually have a picture of it on my phone because the Damahurians did make a time machine, and they were going back in time to Atlantis, and they had this entire process. One of my friends there, she was in charge of looking into this sphere to peer back in time, because the time traveler had to stand at the exact same spot in which they landed to come back to now, right? They had a whole process for this. And I did go into the time machine, but we did not use it to time travel physically, because that takes multiple years of training, and it's a very intense process, right? And I shared with you that I have this video of one of their time travelers speaking about his experience when he went back to Atlantis. For example, when he got off from the chair melted back into the floor. Right? So during that time, they had much more influence and ability to control matter than we currently do now. We'll get there, but they already had that. And so also the suit that he put on, as soon as he zipped it up, became form-fitting and regulated his body temperature perfectly.
So they put on a suit.
Yep. So when he first landed, they gave him this suit to wear that was very loose, but as soon as he zipped it up, it just became form-fitting to his body, and he never felt hot or cold, right? Somehow was able to auto temperature regulate.
Wow.
When they gave him information, they never spoke to him. They put a crystal in his hand, and the way he described it was like, reading 1,000 books all at the same time. What? Right? So just like downloading information into consciousness, right? And there was a ton of other things, like there was no perceived stress that he could find. When he walked through different places, the ambient light, like there was never any like right now we have this like bright light. If we walk out of this room, the bright light's not there anymore. That's a rapid shift for our consciousness in our senses. In Atlantis, that doesn't exist. They were very mindful of even the lighting, that there was never any drastic transitions in light, right? So they were very mindful of the state of the citizens, so that there was literally no perceived stress that he could find. Right. And you can imagine a life of where the environment doesn't impart stress on you. That's a pretty profound environment to live in. Right. And so, and again, they physically time travel back. We used it because I went through an activation process where we remembered and felt our energetic organs, right? Like our chakra, you had mentioned that you're getting into chakras. Like our root chakra has a tail, our heart chakra has wings, our crown chakra has like a little antenna. We have these energetic organs that we can learn to activate and remember. And then we went into the time machine to essentially seal those energetic organs onto ourselves so that we don't forget them. That's what we used it for, right? And so it's like to reorient our molecules is another way to say it. That's what it felt like when I was in a time machine for like 45 seconds. Yeah, I felt all my molecules like vibrating and like shifting, like coming apart and reorganizing itself as it came back together. That's what I felt.
You were only in there for 45
seconds. Yeah. And you had to move. One person who I don't think moved threw up afterwards. So
really?
Yeah.
And how long did it subjectively feel like you were in there for?
45 seconds.
45
I mean,
seconds.
you're very aware. You're in this thing that almost looks like a giant bird cage, basically, with all these. So this is I'm wearing a Selfica. This is a Atlantean technology, basically, right? It's metal in specific bent orientations that has specific vibrational and energetic properties. So they have very advanced forms of this throughout this time machine that is vibrationally and energetically impacting you. And then they hit it. I didn't see what the mechanism was, but basically they hit it with something and the metal of this birdcage started vibrating, and I'm in the vibration field. And I can literally feel my molecules disorienting and reorienting. So,
was there any visual things that you saw, or was it just more of an energetic?
Yeah, energetic. Because
Okay.
I can still see, because my eyes are open, I can still see like the instructor or the person that's controlling the time machine. I can see the room. I'm seeing it, but I can feel this disorienting and reorienting feeling of it.
So for the folks that use it, I'm assuming the people that are more trained to utilize this time machine, are they in it much longer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It literally takes multiple years. And from reading one of their books, they're basically put into like a hypnosis state in order to be able to like tolerate the experience. The time traveler said like he never wants to do it. It was so intense, he doesn't want to do it again.
Really?
Yeah. It's not like an enjoyable experience.
Did he extrapolate more on like what was going on?
I was given what's really interesting, it's a 26-minute video recording of a 2-day event that they had where this time traveler spoke about what he experienced. And what's really interesting is in this 26-minute video, no matter what computer I use or whatever, I can only play 18 minutes of it. The other 8 minutes it somehow doesn't play. No matter how much they try to reformat, change it, just somehow I am not meant to see the other 8 minutes apparently. And so, but I know the woman in this video, Espiride, is a friend, and she is the one that is peering into this sphere in the Hall of Spheres to make sure that the time traveler is able to come back. She is translating his Italian into English, right? And so she's a friend. And so in one-to-one conversations is where she explained to me like, yeah, he really doesn't want to ever do it again. And it's so intense, he doesn't really want to like, because I asked, can we have him? I would love to do an event where we could ask him questions.
Yeah.
She's like, no, he wouldn't want to do that.
Really? Because
it was such a intense experience that he doesn't want to like relive it.
Like beautifully intense, or it sounds like it was
not beautifully.
It was disorienting.
Yeah, disorienting. And I can relate to that because in the 45 seconds, it was very disorienting in just 45 seconds of it. So
what did it feel like?
Again, the best way I can describe it is, I've had this feeling once when I was doing a meditation inside the beta version of the chamber when it was just like the 3 pieces of tech. I felt all of my molecules literally disintegrate. And then I was, my first thought was, holy fuck, I'm disintegrating. And then I was like, oh wait, I'm still thinking, which means, oh wait, I don't need my body. My consciousness clearly does not need my body. And as soon as I had that knowing, all of my molecules came back. It felt like that feeling. It's hard to describe in words, but it's literally like your molecules dissolving into the atmosphere. That's what it feels like.
Okay. And so Atlantis, this was an ancient city.
An entire civilization with multiple outposts throughout the world, but there was a capital essentially, like a main city. But they had, of course, for if a civilization existed for roughly 14,000 years, it would have been around the world a lot.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. And so I want to dive a little bit more. I don't know if you have any more to say on Atlantis and like what, about the civilization, and because you spoke to the Great Flood, right? And so that was kind of like maybe the extinction of that specific human civilization. And
from and the Great Flood is mentioned. It's one of those things that's mentioned again worldwide. Multiple cultures talked about this flood that happened.
Yeah.
And through the religious context, we have the whole God, Moses, all the things, right? Some kind of deity. From an Atlantean or science perspective, they created a technology that they did not fully understand that led to the destruction, that led to the floods, right? And so that's like the non-God way of describing the same occurrence. And there's no right or wrong, right? It's just perspective.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is we are, again, at the intersection of that technological advancement right now, right? Obviously, we've talked about AI, but what we haven't talked about, and we don't need to really get into, which is, CERN, which is the huge particle smasher over there in Europe. They have smashed particles together with enough energy to open portals to other dimensions.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, this is science. You can just like Google this, right? And so, not being talked about, we are literally playing with dimensional things.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, and also they're creating mini black holes, right? And this is what's happening over there. And so you can imagine if that isn't done with the highest discernment and carefulness, that could lead to some unwanted effects. And so what's really interesting is, the law of rhythm, one of the Hermetic laws I love, everything goes in cycles, right? Nothing is linear. And so there are cycles to everything. We're just, again, at another peak of this technological advancement cycle. And, I kind of spoke about when we were in the sauna that this time, though, we're going to make it. Because in the past, it was all about technological advancement, more power, more capabilities. They didn't harmonize that with compassion and love and respect for life.
Okay.
This time, we get to do it with the harmony of compassion and love and respect for life. And we'll make it through this.
Okay. Gotcha. And so the technology that the civilization of Atlantis was using, that was like a dimension type.
They were just way more advanced in their technological, in everything. I mean, technically, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, that they had spaceships that could travel. I mean, like way more on top of molecular manipulation than we are currently. But, give it 10 years, right? Where we are now, we'll probably be potentially close to where they are. If you look at science, just 4 years ago, I read a study that we were able to put a certain frequency in metal, that allows light to shine through it. We're starting to understand the manipulation of matter that much more, right? So we're heading in that same direction.
To even think that there are spaceships, like thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, is incomprehensible for most people.
Yeah, I mean, just think like we are a tiny blurb in the entire existence of Earth, and Earth is a tiny blurb in the entire existence of the universe.
Yeah.
So to think again that, I'll make up a number, that 1 billion years ago, there were infinitely already way more intelligent spaceships flying all around from some other galaxy, probably possible.
Yeah.
Right? It's our ego in the thinking like, no, that we are the most advanced right now.
Yes.
So.
What other lessons at this? It's essentially a school of alchemy.
Well,
right?
Essentially, Dahmer has multiple. It's a community, right? So Dahmer is the name of the community in a town called Vidraco, and this community has roughly, I think, 500 or 600 people that live in the community. And this community isn't one plot of land. They actually live in houses throughout the town of Vidraco, and they have plots of land where the sacred temples are. They kind of hand dug into a mountain these sacred temples, and they have like a sacred forest. They have an outdoor temple. They do have specific plots of land throughout the town, but it isn't like 500 acres where they all live together, right? And so there's that, just so people to visualize. And so you can go there and learn anything from alchemy. And alchemy is a study of transmutation of matter, right? Purifying the vibrational, energetic, and physical aspect of things. That's basically alchemy. They also have a mystery school. Mystery school will be your traditional spirituality school, right? You can learn anything from chakras to dream interpretation to astral travel, all the different cultural, religious things, and all the different deities. So that's the mystery school. They also have a healer school, right? If you want to use energetic tools and energetic self to do healing, they have an entire track for that. They also have a track to be a farmer. Like if you just want to really? Tend land and grow incredible food, they have a track for, you can actually go there for a month and they'll teach you everything about how to start a community just like theirs. Because they've been in existence since the 70s, so they've done it well. So they essentially have incredible wisdom that was hidden for most of their of the life of the community.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I think it's been 9 years now where the founder of Falco passed away. Before he passed away, he said to the citizens, like, the world is ready for our knowledge now. And so they started to slowly open up their teachings to the world.
Wow.
Yeah. But prior to that, literally they've been, keeping things in secrecy. And just to give the viewers and listeners an understanding of how much they know, I took a small group there in September of last year. One of the members brought with him a sacred object that I won't get into the story of it because probably not allowed, but essentially obtained at one of the sacred sites on the planet that she wasn't supposed to technically take in a way. But, and she's had it for like 20 years. And she knew not to show it to anyone, but she knew to bring it to Damaher. As soon as the person that she mystically, magically met at Damaher saw it, he knew that it was a key to a Stargate, a key to a time and space portal. That's how much they know about a lot of things. Yeah. So, and he knew, and he was like, don't show this to anyone. Don't tell anyone. It's only meant for you.
Yeah.
It's how you got it, so on and so forth. They have some deep, deep, deep mystical wisdom. And I really appreciate it because if you talk to them, it'd just be like talking to some guy in a pizza shop.
Yeah.
But they literally have like time traveled and done some really incredible things.
So you experienced some of the time traveling school as well as the alchemy school. Did you do like almost
year 2 of alchemy? Well, year 1 of alchemy is all about energy, frequency, right? We connected to energy of ourselves and we learned to make potions with energies. And graduation on site, we connected to earth, fire, air, water, the elements. And then we went into the sacred forest and we learned to connect to trees. We spoke with the trees and then identified the one tree that we are meant to harvest a staff and a actual magical wand. This is like why it's like Hogwarts. To actually have a magical wand. And that staff and wand was sent into the temples to infuse with, we'll just call it spiritual energy. It's been charged with spiritual energy so that we can use the wand to do specific rituals and energetic spells and things. So that's year 1. Year 2, it's all about time travel. So year 2 is not about getting into the time machine to physically time travel, but it's about using our consciousness to peer through time. In Dhamma-Hermean philosophy, every 4 seconds, 6 new branches of time happen. In other words, 6 new possibilities of the now happens every 4 seconds. And so we can learn to, in a very scientific process, like you pendulum, this is the liquid that you use, this specific crystal, like it's a really actual, it's not just like you make up a symbol and you go. A very ritualistic scientific process that allows you to peer through variations of time. And then when you identify the timeline that is the most resonant to you, you learn how to add density to that timeline, which is like saying giving it more energy so that that timeline manifests for you.
Wow. And so do you plan on doing like a year 3? And is there multiple more years?
Yeah,
ahead?
I've paused for now. I do want to do year 3. Year 3 is they open it back up to much broader, deeper studies. Chimeras, which is like combination, like you can create a new spiritual entity to help you. You can, I don't know, I'll make up something. You can combine the energy of broccoli and the energy of a lion together to make a new energy and have that energy help you in life. That type of stuff.
Broccoli and a lion.
Yeah. There's and again, in multiple cultures, I'm just reading a book from an Andean shaman. In multiple indigenous cultures, this is a normal thing. They talk about it. Again, it's just in the Western world, that energetic spiritual side just was completely wiped out. It's alchemy.
Yeah.
This might not go well with people, but the church wiped it all out.
Really?
The church, the Alexandria library was not burned by accident. If you look into it, it was burned on purpose by, certain people.
Organized religions.
Yes. Yeah. Because all the alchemy books had all this information. And the last thing the controlling structures want is for people to have direct, uninhibited, natural, effortless process to spirit and God.
Why do they want that?
Because they want to be the middleman to say you need to come to church
That's so
in order to do that. And so, again, this may not sit well with people, but we just get to understand that's what it was. Just like if I say to people, our schools were not designed to teach enlightened, healthy, happy children. It was designed to teach children to be obedient factory workers and military personnel.
Yes.
And you can trace this back to exactly, this is in the book that I'm writing. I trace it all the way back to the person facts.
Yes.
Right. And so it's just helpful to understand how human history became what it is so we can meet it with understanding and empathy instead of judgment.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you don't want to judge the organized religious leaders that wiped out magnificent pieces of knowledge. You want to have compassion,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, wow, they just wiped out. That's an aspect of human nature. You want to, like we were discussing before, you can embody that. We are all capable of that. And this school just fascinates me. You sent me their website and I saved it. And at first I was like, I can't believe that they're this open about it, because like all of these things that they're portraying and teaching just seems, beyond conception, at least from a Western United States perspective. And I saw you had a post of the wand that you were able to still retain because you were in maybe Colombia or some other country, and your car was broken into, and a lot of your equipment or whatever was in there was stolen. But the one, you realized that your wand was still intact.
Yeah.
So,
that was huge. I was like, because technically everything else is just stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But that wand was, it was a sacred offering from this tree.
Yeah.
So that was definitely, even though I want to be non-attached to all things, but I'm slightly attached to that wand.
And so this wand, how do you utilize its, I don't know, like abilities? Like, do you use it to this day?
Yeah. First, I'll give it. I use it all the time. So I'll give it context. The reason the Dharma Hurrian use wood, right, is in their philosophy. For people to understand context, there's existence and there's non-existence. Some people in religious words might use good and evil, or devil and God.
Okay.
They don't use those words. They just use existence and non-existence. And another way to say it is really is chaos and order.
Yeah.
Right? Order wants to contain and control things. Life actually is chaos. Life creates variability, right? Constantly more and more complexity. And order wants to contain that. So existence and non-existence, chaos, order. And so they believe that humans have both elements, right? Existence and non-existence, good and evil, chaos and order. Nature only has existence, right? And this kind of shows because nature thrives. If you just leave it alone, it just thrives. It doesn't destroy things. It just lives in harmony and thrives. Humans, not so much, right? And so the reason we use these wands is because when we have our human intention, the spell or ritual that we're using, it goes through the wood and essentially it purifies it in a way where non-existence isn't involved in that process. It's just existence. And so the ritual becomes more pure because it is going through something that's only existence or only life. So that's the context of the wand. And so you can use it I use it a lot when I do these activations where as I serve these sacred drinks to people, it's not just a drink. I infuse it with, I was just facilitating a cacao ceremony down in Florida, and people were like, I've done tons of cacao ceremonies. I just had the most mystical experience. Well, it's because in that moment, I was being told to infuse the cacao with the energy and frequency of rose. They had these roses and amethyst. So I put those two frequencies into the cacao and people drank it. And it said, again, it was unlike any other cacao they've ever drank. And so that's how you can use this alchemy to infuse energy and frequency into things to impact our energetic frequency self.
Yeah, I've got some notes on the cacao ceremony. I don't know if it was the same one. So let's see. There's this fire ceremony with Walter, the Mayan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that wasn't
the video.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the cacao ceremony, but give me 1 second because I've got it here. During this cacao ceremony, we learned. Oh, this is a little different. I think this is also interesting.
Yeah,
and we can just kind of tap into different things. But during this cacao ceremony, we learned that we are kids from 1 to 12. We are teenagers from 13 to 26. We are a young adult from 27 to 39. Then at 40, we reach adulthood. This frame may give you some additional grace. Also, I remind people that each person is in their own unique journey as a collective unified consciousness. So there's no need for comparison. That was one cacao ceremony that you portrayed on your Instagram.
Yeah.
That I thought was pretty fascinating. Because I personally, and I try, once again, I'm transmuting these beliefs, but I have attached my age or different age ranges to where I should be. And that's not how you it doesn't feel like it's the best way to approach this experience. And so that did give me some, just reading saying or reading what you portrayed there did give me grace in that moment. And especially, from the obedient factory worker perspective, it helps people to kind of step out of that age range attachment. I need to be married at this point and have kids at this point and a successful job that's making this much money at this point, and my 401k needs to be at this, so that was pretty cool. And that fire ceremony with Walter, that didn't really have anything to do with cacao, I don't think.
No, yeah. So that cacao ceremony, what I learned from that Mayan wisdom, was really profound.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, it just gives you insight and wisdom to recontextualize Western set standards of age and accomplishment, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because if you think about it, you're 30, you're like a young adult. Young adults would be like, I should be doing adult stuff because I'm a young adult.
Yeah.
But in Western culture, it's like you're an adult, so on and so forth. So these labels influence everything, right? So it just kind of goes back to, we have this incredible opportunity to relabel everything. And I recommend to people that as you become aware of this, the initial knee-jerk reaction is, I should be doing blank. You're essentially like wronging what was done in the past. And so it's like you're trying to practice not wronging by wronging, right? And so there's an opportunity to be like, oh, well, I contracted and thought that way so that I can feel how and what I feel now, if that makes sense. Always appreciate, if you want to be hot, always appreciate the cold. You needed the cold to be hot.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the times the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I should have not been cold. I should have been hot already.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I appreciate the cold. That's how I can feel hot. Right? And so that's just a beautiful context for everyone listening. Because again, I think there's this knee-jerk meta reaction like, oh, I've learned the better or quote unquote right way. I should not have done the wrong or lesser effective way. So no, you love the quote unquote wrong and lesser effective way because that's how you appreciate the better and right way.
Yeah.
Right. So just literally it goes back to, from that perspective, like everything has been divinely orchestrated for you. Right? It's unfolding as it is. So there's that. And then, so that was the cacao ceremony. And then we did this fire ceremony with Walter when I was back at that place. And that was a video, and it was such an incredible video because I captured it in slow motion. There's a fire, but in this video, you'll see like 6 inches above the fire, there literally is an energetic bubble reflecting back the energy of the fire back down. It's a very visible, undeniable thing of capturing like, oh wait, there's this other thing going on in energy world besides our 5 human senses.
Yeah. And what you wrote, frequency alignment through spiritual and alchemy practices are followed by subconscious clearings. Once space is made and vibrations are turned, we then put activated stem cells into the body. The idea is to rejuvenate and activate the mind, body, and spirit. As usual, the feedback from day one has been this was more profound than any Aya journey.
Yeah.
It's time for people to realize it's not the substance, it's all about the process. This is possible because the entire paradigm is not use this for that. It is not healing. It is not getting rid of limiting beliefs. It is not making breakthroughs. There are plenty of facilitators and coaches that help you get from A to B. This is about realizing that you've always been at B, and it's even more beautiful than you thought. And I think there was more to that, but I didn't take it all down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being more powerful than an Aya ceremony. And you didn't really take anything through that fire ceremony, right? It was...
Yeah. So this process, the post that you're speaking of, it's a 5-day process. And essentially, broad strokes overview is the first half of the process is about embedding alchemy and hermetics into people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find that once you have that as a tool, you start to automatically live from this divine vibration without trying, right? And also the other way to say it is your operating system is different. It's like instantly updating the operating system so all the apps run better. And when you start to operate from the hermetics, you automatically start to let go of the ego, right? Because without the hermetics, the only way you can sense make in the world is through your stories and your experiences, also known as your ego.
Yeah.
When you start to operate and sense make from the laws of polarity and rhythm and mentalism, which are not your ego, they're these divine rules, your ego takes a backseat, right? So again, it's a beautiful way to sort of become non-attached to your ego, because if you try to become non-attached to your ego, you become attached to your ego.
Yeah.
Right? That's the whole, don't think of a pink elephant.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that. And so in that process, there are parts of it that does involve a little bit of psilocybin, right? And so, but here's the interesting part. I've had plenty of people come to these things where they go, I don't take any, in their words, drugs. So they don't take any psilocybin. They just drink cacao. They still talk to God. They still have the most profound experience of their lives. I've also had people that come that said, I've done over 50 journeys involving various plants. Still the most profound on like 1 gram of psilocybin, right? Not even a heroic dose.
Yeah.
The reason is it's the process, right? It's not the substance or the things. It's because we go through this arc where first they take the hermetics intellectually in. And then it's almost like, all right, I have it in a little thumbstick drive. I want to stick it into your hard drive, right? That's the hermetics part. But if your hard drive is full of data, you don't have room to take any more data in. So we go through this process where we clear their subconscious. That's kind of like making room in your hard drive.
Yeah.
Right? Because our subconscious mind runs our life. We think we are consciously making choices. We are, but here's a science of our conscious mind. It processes between 8 to 200 bits of information per second. Our subconscious, 200 million to 400 billion bits. Which one's more powerful? Clearly the subconscious. And so we dissolve a lot of stuck energies and information in the subconscious to clear it. That allows the quote unquote data of the hermetics to take, into the subconscious, right? It's almost like making room for the operating system install. And once we install the operating system, they're now operating from this incredibly higher, more elevated state. Then we take their own stem cells, activate it, and put it back into their body, right? Because the idea is that if we do a stem cell procedure in someone that's depressed, anxious, and sad, it's not going to work as well, the same procedure, as someone that's in joy, love, and bliss. Makes sense. That was my hypothesis 5 years ago. I started doing events to test that hypothesis, and now we've seen, of course, it makes a huge difference, right? And so it's really about rejuvenating the mind, the body, and the spirit in this entire process.
Yeah, there was, I can't find it. I took it down. It reflected upon establishing clarity of your intentions through non-intentions. I can't remember if it was the same quote, but it was allowing the spiritual self to guide the ego self. And I can see how if you're really in this, maybe, anxious or you're depressed and you're really in these egoic formed stories, that maybe the frequency of your vibrational, the essence of who you are in this meat suit that we're in, maybe on that spectrum of, the triangle spectrum of like, joy all the way down to shame, showing those different frequencies. I can see how the experience may not be as powerful. Before I did my second ayahuasca retreat, I did multiple things before. I opened myself up to like romantic love. So I did like certain speed dating events that I don't always do. It's the two times that I've done it. It's the first 2 times I've ever done it. I've never thought about doing speed dating before.
Yeah.
And I've had these stories based off of things that happened to me when I was younger that I wasn't maybe worthy enough for a romantic partnership. And so I dropped that belief, and I was very proud of my presence at these speed dating events for, it was like 30 different women that I met. And it was just so I did that. I also did the practice of Kambo, the Amazonian frog medicine that was on Saturday. Sunday, I did somatic breath work. And so during the Kambo session, I released what felt like a deep sense of grief. And then the somatic breath work, it was just so much laughter. I laughed so much. And so then that was on Sunday. And then Monday was when we went to the retreat. And then Tuesday was the first ayahuasca ceremony. And I felt so like I release a lot of emotions. And I just felt very much, I felt very just ready and like initiated to enter into the ayahuasca ceremonies. Like I just shed some energy, and I feel like we should always be doing that, not just to prepare like the dieta that you prepare for the ceremonies. The dieta should be all of life, like life is the ceremony. So yeah, seeing these aspects of the process is very important. Intrigued me and was nourishing for me to read, because once again, I've tied, once I ingest this ayahuasca or psilocybin, I can reach these states of consciousness, and you're dependent. The relationship is dependent on reaching those states. So
yeah, I'll share an interesting story with you. 3 nights ago, I was watching Superman.
Okay.
And whenever Superman was flying in the movie, I was in this incredible state of bliss, because I am flying like Superman, because I've had multiple dreams of very vivid dreams of flying. And so I'm just like reliving it in the awake state. Right. And so we all have this incredible ability to tap into that state in just everyday things. Before I eat, I always like ho'oponopono to food. And after that, depends on what I'm called to do. Sometimes other things come up. And so there are times where I envision like this column of light through the food. And essentially whatever that plant or animal is and was, I'm basically enveloping it in this column of light. And essentially it's almost like an offering. Like I am supporting it to be that much more in harmony with source. It's almost like giving it back to source as I eat it. And in those moments, I will literally have somatic releases. Like I can literally feel energy, and sometimes I'll cry, sometimes I'll laugh. Like physical movements happen.
Even if you didn't raise, because you've portrayed for meat eaters to raise that specific animal with, a divine energetic presence of like putting your spirit into that animal.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you didn't raise. I'm not sure if you were eating meat or plants.
Typically. And so sometimes I will do that.
Okay.
Sometimes in this time that's coming up to me to share is just a column of light.
Okay.
There's no intention.
Okay.
And so there's this, and be open to the processless process. Does that make sense? Like, in other words, the process that I have is I'm going to do something. And I typically start with the Ho'oponopono, but after that, I leave room for divine intervention. I don't have like I'm definitely going to do this process. Right. So it's harmonizing essentially my ego. Like, I'm going to do the Ho'oponopono. I'm going to bless the food with divine. I have no idea what's going to happen. And whatever comes, I just do it. Right. And so and I'm just sharing that because that's a daily ritual that can lead to profound benefits, right? Profound aspects of self-awareness, right? It's like your system will enjoy training every day versus twice a year with no training running a marathon. It's just our system, and you can apply it to everything. Yeah. It just likes daily devotions, little bits versus these huge things once in a great while.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It shows up in pretty much every aspect of life.
Yeah. I've found myself being intentional with the source of my food. I don't eat fast food. I'm pretty intentional about where I get my food and what I eat. But I do still find myself maybe eating, just shoving it down, and not maybe taking time to, blessing your food has been a ritual for many people. Saying grace at Thanksgiving. But yeah, nowadays we don't really develop that relationship. It's just like heat it up in the microwave or go to a fast food restaurant and then you just gobble it down. And you really don't have there's no sacredness, if you will.
Yeah.
And so to go back to ayahuasca real quick, you had told me something at the dinner about the dark side of ayahuasca. And I think you were creating a mental map for shamans that are utilizing ayahuasca. We never dove into it too intimately because the dinner was just flowing. Would you be open to discussing what you're creating there?
Yeah. So many people, ayahuasca right now is like the it plant. Yeah. Right. Like everyone just talks about, oh my God, I did Aya and now I am blank, blank, blank. I will say that from being in this space for, it started about 16, so 32 years, I've seen a lot of data. And what I have yet to see someone that like sat with Aya, and if you notice my language, right, instead of doing Aya, sat with Aya, related to ayahuasca. And in that moment, everyone's like, wow, that was profound. But every one of those people within the next 3 years will experience, in their terms, I don't use this term, some kind of dark night of the soul.
Okay.
And essentially, without giving a bunch of labels, what happens is when you first open a door and you do see things that you've never seen before, the ego is going to be like, this is amazing. And look how far I've come, right? But the thing is, that is still the ego wanting to be good enough.
Yeah.
Right. And so we don't sit with Aya and we go, I know even less now. Right. We typically go, no, I've learned so much. I've realized so much, without realizing that's still the ego driving and be like, you're better now. And so because of that game, people will be shown aspects where, again, something dramatic will happen in their lives. Right. And mainly because they've taken on this, they've made this big jump and it's never been integrated is another way we could say it. Right. I'll use physiological terms, right? You don't train, you run a marathon. You're like, hey, look, I'm amazing. I run a marathon. But because you didn't train, your ligaments got torn. Your body couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And you suffer for the next couple months.
Yeah.
Right. This is what would happen. Same thing with any very extreme PEAK experience, a peak experience. And so I recommend people doing PEEK experiences on a daily basis. You peek into yourself on a daily basis versus a PEAK with Aya with something else. So there's that context. In terms of the dark side, yeah. I mean, I've seen demon extractions. I've seen people literally parts of their soul fragments did not come all the way back. I've seen real world experience where this couple who has 3 kids, the couple went and sat with Aya. The day after, the wife didn't feel right. A week after, she basically just left the family, gone.
Wow.
No note. They don't know where she is. She's gone. Right. And so these things don't get publicized and talked about, but they happen. And the reason is some of these containers, right? So what's really interesting is you need someone that's really on top of energy, because Aya is a huge portal opener. And because people are not going in it with any training, they need a lot more support, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. And so the energy person has to be that much more on top of keeping a nice, clean, energetic container that nothing that is not meant to come in comes in. I'll just put it that way. Right. So there's that. And also, Aya does surface a lot of things. And the energy containers, trainers, or facilitators are typically shamans. Here's the thing. A shaman, their whole life, has been trained to facilitate this for people in their tribe.
Right.
Which means when people are after the ceremony, they're in their community and they get to consistently support them.
Right. Yeah.
This is not the current system. This is like some Westerner flies somewhere, sits with Aya, flies back and goes into a Western life. I don't think shamans are trained to do that, right? I don't think the existing container that they built is meant for this system. It was meant for the system of an indigenous people in their tribe comes in, and that's the container. And that's where for thousands of years. This new container of like someone from LA goes to Peru, goes back to LA, that system I don't think really works. Yeah. And so what I'm getting at is there are some things that does have opportunities for us to revamp, right? And so in my mind, the ideal process would be there is an energetically aware person casting the container, but there needs to be someone that is psychologically trained to continue with the person to support them.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Right. Because if not, this is where a lot of things that leads to their quote unquote dark night of the soul. Yeah. They weren't ever taught how to integrate. And the thing is, all of this is even more difficult without a new operating system, because you can experience these mystical things, but your sense making is still from your ego. It's the only thing that you can make sense from, right? You're still making sense and integrating back into the current operating system of your identity and your stories.
Yeah.
This is where I believe alchemy and hermetics has a huge, huge, huge opportunity for the world, especially in the psychedelic space, because it gives people an entirely new operating system in which to sense make, right? And so what I'm doing is creating an open source document where it's like energetic. What's the pre, during, and post protocol? Biologically, what's the pre, during, post protocol? Physically, what's the pre, during, and post protocol? Right. And so, and it's open source because I don't know all of it. The idea is I'll create the framework, and I want to invite experts in each of those areas that contribute to this open source protocol that is free, and you share it with the world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with, and I've embodied that. I've had the experience of doing these retreats, being in Costa Rica. We did it in the beginning of the week, and then the middle and the end of the week, we're in the jungle of Costa Rica with these people. So it's nice to be able to kind of communicate and whatnot, but it's only for a couple of days. Then you go back to Austin, Texas. And I think both of my ayahuasca retreats were profound. And my unraveling after was pretty gracious, because I've been able to, I think, do the work before and after. So going to the gym, meditating, eating right, doing breath work on a daily basis. So I'm embodying these practices. And I didn't get that dark night of the soul, thankfully.
Mhm.
But my ego, I still find myself attaching to try to make sense of things.
Mhm.
Um, and I can totally, I mean, I remember some of the people that were at the last retreat. We would do Zoom calls. I think we did 2 Zoom calls after, and that was really it. And thankfully, the practitioners were like, "You're gonna experience a contraction." You were just so open.
Mhm.
And some of the people were like, "Yeah, I'm experiencing it pretty hardcore. Like it's uncomfortable. Like
Mhm.
the coming back to regular civilization, back to my family, and you do these
Mhm.
2 Zoom calls, and that's really it."
Mhm.
So I think what you're creating, I'm super interested in learning about and seeing how it evolves, being like an open source
Mhm.
mind map. And yeah, the extraction of a demon, that sounds really creepy. It must have been a creepy thing to observe.
Yeah, and if that word is scary, because when I say demon, um, that comes with every movie about every demon in your
The
subconscious
Exorcist.
feeling.
Yeah.
We could say extraction of a denser vibration and energy that didn't belong to you,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's what it
I
is.
think I'm actually more nervous towards a part of your soul is extracted that that was maybe not that denseness, but it was just you mentioned after the extraction of a demon, like some fragments of someone's soul was maybe also extracted but never came back. That's
Yeah,
that creates a
and
little yeah.
in shamanic traditions, that's actually a very normal occurrence.
Mm,
Just to give context, in shamanic ways of looking at it, when we were young and we experienced what I call a heightened emotional experience, what
mhm.
the industry calls trauma, that's already giving it a story, right?
Yeah,
Without a story, it's just emotions were high,
yeah.
right? And so when we experience a heightened emotional experience, that's our physical body feeling like, for me, the terror.
Mhm,
My energetic self would have protected myself by keeping a part of my soul out of the equation that just was not ready to experience it,
mm,
right? And so there would be a part of your soul that goes somewhere else. And then shamans can do soul retrieval. This is probably one of the most profound services or an offering or a thing that I recommend to people is to do a soul retrieval. But
mm,
you want to make sure you do it with a very skilled, qualified shaman,
okay.
right? And so they basically have the ability to go to the astral, to a place, and help you retrieve these soul parts. And what's fascinating is, anyone that can Google like symptoms of soul loss, literally eh, most of American um, sleeplessness, anxiety, all the symptoms
Mhm,
are all parts of soul loss,
okay.
right? And so again, there's this energetic part that's not being talked about. There's talks of like somatic releases. Obviously, there's psychological therapy and counseling for the heightened emotional experiences, but it also affects our energetic self,
Mm,
our spiritual self. And so that part kind of gets missed. And there are tremendous opportunities to do that. And and it's a normal thing. And I can tell you the most gifted psychic, energy, aware, attune, channel, all the things, people that are very in tune to spirit,
mhm,
they're all people I've met with the biggest heightening emotional experiences where a part of their soul went and then came back, and it came back with it a more clear channel to that astral realm, if
mm,
that makes sense. Almost like there was a benefit of their soul
yeah,
leaving because it left a roadmap of how to connect to that.
yeah.
And they're the most in tune people that I know.
Huh.
So it goes back to every one of our quote unquote traumas that we are told are horrible for you are actually the greatest gifts.
Mm,
It's just how we frame it.
yeah. Oof. Yeah. Um, so you were at this lake,
Hmm.
and I think it was a book writing retreat.
Hmm. Like Atalan.
Yes. Would love to hear more about the experience at that lake, and
Hmm.
then also about your book. I'm anxious to read it. I would love to. I'm definitely going to be um, a purchaser of that book because I mean, I still have so much on my in my notes that we could cover because I'm just
Yeah.
so fascinated by a lot of the knowledge you portray. But if you want to get into the lake and the book
Yeah,
process.
super quick. The Lake Atlan itself is this incredibly supportive place, I'll call it. When I first landed there, I've been all over the world, spiritual sites and all the things. And I've never been to a place where the elements of air, fire, earth, and water are all 10 out of 10, but yet harmonized and wanting to support you. And so for those of you that are very in tune to energy, you'll understand and get what that means. For those of you that have not embarked on that practice, that's like saying you feel nurtured by the earth, by the water, by the air you breathe, and by the warmth intensely, right? So you're literally enveloped, like earth in every which way is holding you and saying, I've got you. What would you like to do? That's like the feeling. And so spent a month there. And also this specific property called Anzan, which I highly recommend people go to. Even how the woman came about this land was kind of mystical. Like European woman retires, goes to Lake Atlan as a tourist to visit, to check it out, ends up in a town hall meeting, but it really wasn't just a town hall meeting. It was the owner of the land selling the land. And all these local people that live there want to buy it. He sees her and goes, it's meant for you, and sells it to this European female, right? And so she takes the land, which at the time had nothing on it, and builds it into this incredible, nurturing, beautiful estate, essentially. And, like has a helicopter pad, so you can literally like land from the airport, fly a helicopter to, and you're on site. And like the food that you eat literally was probably in the ground an hour ago from the garden. Now it's on your plate. Right. And so that the food is nourishing, the elements are there. And so, the opportunity to spend a month there just writing this book, writing about 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. So within that month, I 95% completed a book, wrote about 160,000 words.
Wow.
And now I'm just in the process of finishing some parts and consolidating it. And the goal is to kind of launch it January of 2025. But I can, of course, give you like pre-edited raw stuff to you if you want.
That'd be great.
And the reason we're timing that way is I want to launch it when the app that Ammortal is making launches. The app will be the game changer for humanity. And so the book really just becomes a magnet for people to consume the book. And then the book will give them tools and resources and knowledge, but the app gives them an environment to continue to embody everything in the book and more.
Oh, wow. And so do you have a title? I don't know if you want to reveal it, if you do.
I mean, right now it's not the official title, Sacred Bridge.
Okay.
But it's a bit too nebulous from a marketing perspective.
Okay.
So I got to think of a really good tagline if I want to stick with that. I'm working with Michael Drew, who's this incredible, book publishing expert. He's helped sell 67 million books. And so, he's an expert at this. I'm just, following his guidance on sort of the marketing part of it.
Yeah.
And the goal is to get it out there in a big way. And obviously I'm biased since I wrote it, but there are tools that in the book that I give that I've been using in these deep spiritual activation retreats that I run, where people's lives immediately shift in a couple of days. I give it away for free in the book. So I have lots of data that these things work.
Wow.
From years of data. And I'm just like, here you go. It's in the book. So,
Super exciting. Would love to take a look at it. We've gone, I mean, we were almost close to 3 hours. So I don't know where you're at.
Holy, okay.
I think we've gone, because we started a little after 10. So it's like 12:51 now.
Okay.
So I want to be mindful of your time. So
I think if there are other really, really important stuff that you want to get through, I'm more than happy to talk about it. Yeah.
Awesome. So very much looking forward to the book. And I really liked something that you portrayed. You stated, I believe in the near future, entrepreneurs will lead the way and infuse these vibrations into everything they create. A product made within the current paradigm of stress and fear. And we've kind of discussed this, but we'll have a very different impact on reality than a product made with wholeness and love.
Mhm.
It's time to bring alchemy back into our everyday life and remember we are the players and creators of this game. And my last guest, Matt Worthington, he's the, which, yeah, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
he is the founder of Riser. We had a discussion about this and I never looked at it like from this perspective. And it makes the entrepreneurial route just like that more fun and exciting. Because for me, I actually had a little bit of maybe fear around it because the W-2 9 to 5 is like, okay,
Mhm.
you've got this paycheck coming in,
Mhm.
you know, you've got these guidelines, you've got these boundaries that are then instructed to you, and you're just kind of like in a way, like the factory worker. Whereas being an entrepreneur, it's just an open world for you to explore.
Mhm.
And Matt's bringing together with Reveal and Riser all these different creators. And I think it's so important because I see so many people just creating things for the sake of revenue.
Mhm.
And they want to make enough money so they can do the next thing. And to a degree, I think it's sort of selfish to do that. At least I would feel selfish if I were to say, I'm going to create this app and I don't really care about the consequences that it has on humanity because I know it's just going to make me millions of dollars.
Mhm.
So I really liked that perspective, and I'm not sure if you have anything to extrapolate on that because I think it's so important, especially in the Austin area. We have so many entrepreneurs, especially here at Squatch,
Yeah.
Sapien Center. I mean, you can run into people at Kuya and on it. So if you have any like extrapolations or anything you want to unravel with that.
Yeah, I do. So, my definition of an entrepreneur is essentially someone that's creating something for the world to fit a need, right? And so, from that perspective, what's really interesting is any one of us can easily be an entrepreneur. We're all capable of creating something, right? And so, there's that. But the even bigger Russian nesting doll, I was like, let's go wide.
Mhm.
I have a discussion with my two daughters, right? The discussion goes something along the lines of this. The current American paradigm is you work hard, you save money, hopefully somewhere a few $1,000,000, and then you retire at age 65, right? And notice the language. It isn't to re-thrive, it's to retire. Uh-huh. Pay attention to the codes. So why would you want to tire again? Why would you want to re-thrive? And so that's the current paradigm, right? You spend roughly 40 years working to amass enough and endure and put up with to amass enough stuff that you can then retire at age 65. I offer them a different game, which is you spend the next 5 years, and they're 12 and 15. Just spend the next 5 years saving 10 people's lives. For the rest of your life, whatever you need, do you think you need to worry if you don't have food, do you think one of those 10 is going to give it to you? If you don't have clothing, shelter, if you need to travel, do you think one of those 10 people would not let you stay or pay for your travel? Of course they would. You save their lives. And so it is just a different paradigm, right? And essentially it's a paradigm of how do we deeply impact another? That is the greatest contribution and really the greatest path for freedom. We all know this. It shows up in scripture in so many cultures, servicing and all the things. And so it's just a different paradigm than amassing, and that is the freedom, right? And so, I offer that. So even as an entrepreneur, like, I've had many businesses. My first business, a supplement business, it wasn't like, I'm going to create a supplement and make lots of money. It was, I need to create a supplement because no one makes this and I want to take it. So it's really for selfish reasons. But then all these people started taking it and would send things like, I trained twice as hard and as an athlete and now I can recover. Like the Portland Trailblazers, there was a news article about their pregame ritual was to drink our product, basically. And I didn't set out with the intention of that. We were in like 138 Kroger stores in Northwest, expanded rapidly. And it all just came from like, there was a need and it didn't exist. Even the cold plunge that I'm making now, every cold plunge in the market is just cold water. I was like, don't people realize water is one of the best conductors of frequency? Why hasn't anyone energetically enhance the water. It doesn't exist. I looked. I'm going to go and make it. Right. And so it just comes from seeing a thing that I would love to do and want and use, but it doesn't exist. So I'm going to go and create it. And so the reason I mention that is it is selfish, but let's reframe selfish. If I am the universe, then if I purely intentionally serve the self from love, then I am also serving the universe with love. And that's a really important context for people because a lot of people push away selfishness and it becomes a forced humility, a forced act. It isn't natural, if that makes sense, right? It's like trying not to be selfish works against you. If you just enjoy being selfish, but the relationship to the self is one of love, then it works well.
Yeah. I think that's just obviously taking care of the basic necessities, the hierarchy of needs, and embodying that energy of love, like I am love, I am God, and then going out and letting the creative process naturally flow, and to tie into the entrepreneurial route. I think this can tie into it. This is a quote from you. I'm seeing so many men in their spiritual path lean so much into the feminine, allowing, surrendering, flowing energy. I just want to remind the men that force, focus, direction, structure, and even aggressiveness are all needed to harmonize with the feminine energy. And you kind of just displayed that natural selfishness, and then intertwined here that focus, direction, and that force. Yeah, I'm curious how you harmonize that, how you're able to balance or let that flow in a way that feels feels right or true to you.
Yeah, this is a huge topic.
And sorry to interrupt. Just the aspect of the feminine, like in part or embodying that, I think to a lot of men, at least some men that I know, they think like that sounds weird to have a feminine aspect of it. So I don't know if you want to like provide details on that.
Yeah. In the personal development and definitely in the spirituality space, I mean, especially here in Austin, right? Like you see a lot of men embarking on their journey of spirituality that involves being emotional, right? Sharing your emotions, right? They would call it vulnerability, and softening into what they do, right? And allowing, stop trying to control all the things, and you allow, which is feminine energy. The thing is, we can't shift the world with only feminine energy. There needs to be force. And there's just actually, I want to zoom out a bit. There's just a lot of misdirection happening that we get to pay attention to. For example, if you notice the language, a lot of people talk about ascending, right? Going up, elevate your frequency, up, up, up. There's also a lot of talks of down and black. Down is hell. Down is not good. Black, when a white cat walks in front of you, black cat, oh my God, not so good. Black is associated with evil, with darkness, with not being good.
Yeah, superstition.
Yeah, right. That is all by design. True awakening, the true path, is actually about going down, not up. Because if you just take your intellect and go up, yes, you can do all the great things, but it's not done with love. We all know if we take our mind and we put it and connect it to your heart, which is going down, it creates a much bigger electromagnetic field from us. This is science, right? We want to connect even more, right? And so really, I would delete that connect. I would say we want to bring our consciousness to our heart. They're never not connected, right? And so there's a lot of misdirection language of going up, up, up and not down, right? So there's that. Black is feminine. It's the mystery. It's the ether. It's where all possibilities lie. if we want to create anything new, it comes from the unknown. That's why it becomes new. And so there's a reason why black is like, no, that's evil, that's not good, because those that already have existing structures and control would never want you to embrace the black and the mystery and the unknown, because that's how you create new things.
Right.
And it would disrupt their existing structures.
Yeah.
So just want to, give people that context and be aware of that. And so within that, I see, as I zoom out and from being in the space for 30 plus years, there is this languaging of like any male that shows any kind of aggression, they call it toxic masculinity.
Yep.
Right? There's this subduing of the masculine. And this is showing up not only psychologically through movies and through media, but it's definitely showing up biologically. Most of the pesticides and plastics are estrogen based. We are more estrogenic now than we've ever been, right? And so it's showing up biologically, we're being feminized, right? There's something happening, right? And this is not conspiracy theory. We're just saying something's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not saying why, right? Something's happening where we're being pushed into that sort of feminine state, but we need to embrace our masculine warrior and king archetype, right? There's 4 archetypes, right? The magician, right? The
lover.
Right, lover, and then king and warrior. And so everyone is trying to be more lover and magician, right? They want to do all the mystical things and energy things and want to be, tantra love. But you can't change the world with just those 2 energies. You need a warrior and a king.
Yeah.
And the warrior and king are being suppressed. And so that post really is alluding to that. Many of my posts, have many layers of codes in it, right? You can interpret the post through many layers.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to the deeper layers of that post, which is be very aware that we do get to honor our king and warrior archetype. It's just that when that aggression comes out, you harmonize it with love, right? Like there are times where, obviously if someone's in danger, you need to step up and be like, this is what needs to be done. That boom, boom, boom. You can't just be like, well, I'll surrender and leave it to the universe. Yeah. I'm seeing that a lot right now, right? And so I'm like, no, like someone needs to provide a structure.
Yeah.
In certain moments, if your house is on fire, you're probably not going to be like, well, this is meant to be like, you might want to go in there and save your children. Right. And so there's a lot of that at a mini scale that's happening. I'm noticing that, people get to be aware of, and just notice that the mass media, whatever is becoming very popular, start to question it. Right? Because popular means it's mass media. Who are in charge of the mass media? We all know, probably not in favor of thriving humanity.
Yeah.
So anything that gets into mass media, you got to start questioning, because the people that's in charge of distribution may not have your personal empowerment as their top priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of descending or the intellectual ascension and trying to get more to the top and whatnot on an intellectual basis, the book I mentioned to you in the gym, Gift of the Body by Jonathan Goldman, he talks about the heart chakra, and he's got this interesting quote, and it goes along the lines of like a mentally challenged person will make it to a higher spirit, like to a higher spiritual realm. I'm totally paraphrasing here. He says it maybe in a different way, than any of the greatest philosophers and intellectuals that create, massive, accomplishments on paper. Because that mentally challenged individual is operating from the heart. And I think the last thing that Jonathan says is that the spiritual realm honors the heart more than the like heady. And that quote came to mind when you were talking about that, which is very, very interesting. And so, yeah, I was gonna ask, do you have any specific practices where people can actually expand, like actual practical routines where they can expand their heart more? Which for me, I mean, I've found just meditating, breath work has helped. gratitude, maybe actual prayer and whatnot. But I wasn't sure if you have any different practices.
Yeah, I think that practice can be very individualized, right? We all know one pill doesn't fit everyone.
Yeah.
So I'll start with that. But I do have some favorite pills of mine.
Sure.
But I want to give context that my favorite pill may not be as effective for someone else.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And so, and again, I'm always a huge fan of contextualizing first. A lot of people believe that they have a difficult time meditating, right? Because they'll go, I can't quiet my mind. And my offer to them is just recontextualize it. Don't call it meditating. Just call it like sitting still and paying attention to your breath, right? Essentially that, because everyone can do that.
Yeah.
And so, because that becomes a great practice. But I know a lot of people like, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind because they're already thinking about what's the end result of meditation. And it says, I can't get there.
Yeah.
But if you just go sit and breathe, I think everyone can sit and breathe, right? So that foundation for sure. Beyond that, I am a huge fan of the Ho'oponopono, right? It's simple. Everyone can do it. And it has profound energetic impact on a human, I find far greater than gratitude. So, right? Because I mean, gratitude is built into it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'll explain the Ho'oponopono a bit. So, and I'll give context. I've been quote unquote using the Ho'oponopono for years, like 5 or 6 years. You know, in the past, I would use it like if I was angry at you, I'd be like, okay, I'm sorry, Shane. Please forgive me. Sorry, thank you, right? So on and so forth. And what I realized actually, basically last December doing like the toughest breakup ever. Like I was like crawled up in bed and just crying for like days. Again, the knowing came and said, go take the certification for the Ho'oponopono. And I'm basically arguing with myself, saying, why do I need to take the certification? I know this. I've been doing it. And then the knowing is like, go take the certification. I was like, all right. So I go and paid for the certification by Dr. Hugh Lin. It's a recording. And essentially, it was life-changing because it completely gave me a new understanding, the root essence, real understanding of the Ho'oponopono, which is the only person you ever say it to is essentially source, God, universe, whatever you're okay with. And what you're really saying is, you know, I love you, source, God, universe. I'm sorry I have not recognized your divine orchestration and love in every moment in my life. Please forgive me. Thank you. Right? That's very different than directing at someone or something, right? Or self. You only ever say it to and about source, God, you know, universe. And as you do that, what happens is you're going down again. He's like, you got to go down first before you go up. You go down, your consciousness goes down into your heart and into your subconscious, and it clears your subconscious to allow miracles and God and source to come in. Right. And so it's one of my favorites. Why I do it, you know, before every bite of food. I just kind of incorporate it into my daily practice.
Do you find that it's more effective if you do it in the privacy of your own, you know, your own heart, or because some people will do it with others, and maybe it's because they have some kind of dense energetic relationship with that person, like they got into a conflict with their family member, and then they do the Ho'oponopono
together
with them, or they'd rather do it because maybe that other person doesn't want to do that, so they do it in their own. They just sit on their couch, they think of that person with that intention.
So the that's what I used to do. The certification says no, you don't do any of that. You don't think of any other person. You just think of source, God, universe. That's it. That was the big aha. As soon as you intend it to someone, it dissolves the essence of it. Like you're not really doing the Ho'oponopono at that point. You're saying the words, but you're not connecting to the essence of the Ho'oponopono. The essence of the Ho'oponopono is you're only ever saying it to God, source, universe. God, you know, you can get your leg chopped off by Bob. You don't say it to Bob. Bob doesn't even exist. You're still just being like, God, I love you. God, thank you for orchestrating every moment. Please forgive me.
Okay, gotcha.
That was the big aha. It's a subtle but profound difference. And so I'm a player in this game of life. So I tested it by doing the Ho'oponopono for 20 hours a week for 2 weeks.
I'm sorry.
20 hours a week for 2 weeks.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Right. And then for 9 consecutive days, a miracle happened every single day.
Wow.
Every day, a miracle happened for 9 consecutive days for 20 hours. Yeah.
That's
a week.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's that context, that aha moment. Because I was doing it for specific things, events, people.
That's what I used to do.
Yeah.
And then the knowing was like, go take this vacation. Basically, the knowing was saying you never apply to any specific situation or thing. You only ever direct it to God.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one note that I have here that was speaking to spiritual bypassing. I know we've kind of touched on a lot of things. We've gone from different places.
It's a good topic.
I believe this note here is in context of spiritual bypassing. You noted it can perpetuate the chasing of spiritual energetic powers as a replacement or in concurrent with material powers. There is a beautiful lesson in that path. For me, some lessons were: the path of striving for powers blurs the line and the ability to discern truth and falsehood. In religious terms, it could be good and evil. I personally don't use those words. And the second one is it perpetuated the not there yet story, as many of these teachings and courses have level 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Nature doesn't have levels. Number 3, I've found that subtraction and simplicity has been more serving than adding and complexity. Course on removing the society programming of more efficiency transactions will be more enlightening than seeing without your eyes, astral traveling, or any manifesting or linear gland opening techniques. And then I think the last thing you said was, if you want to attain the highest realization, truth, or God, do not look for extraordinary phenomena or powers, but strive steadily on, deepening your meditation and the joy that comes with awareness of God's presence. Do not be lured from your goal by psychic phenomena, no matter how interesting they may seem. That's a powerful, that post was so relevant to my life. I think it hit me more because in the age of social media, being an entrepreneur, wanting to have conversations on a podcast, you're just like, oh, what's the next topic that I can discuss about? And even for people that aren't doing a podcast, if they're just on this spiritual path and they believe they're on this spiritual path, they may start to seek all these different lineages of different spiritual practices and different plant medicines, different this and that. And so to display what you displayed here might be hard for people to understand. Do you want to extrapolate on that?
Yeah, I can unpack it a bit. Essentially, the pattern that I see, and first of all, I do want to share that everything that I write is just my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Blanket caveat. And so what I see as a pattern is many of, as my friends who I see their posts and their shares are entrepreneurs, right? And so they tend to have spent many years, if not decades, playing this Western society game, right? Amassing money, essentially. And many of them now are realizing, wait a minute, I've got some, but I am not any more fulfilled or happy than when I had none, right? They go, something's off. And then they go on this spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey typically is involving some kind of psychedelics or something, right? Typically. So this is the pattern. And then what I see on their posts is they used to post pictures of like their cars and their jets, and now they post pictures of them doing ayahuasca. And it's great. I think it's great to share your life passions, but I offer them the invitation to question, are they still essentially replacing the money carrot with the spiritual carrot?
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And that is something to be very aware of, because the entire game is that really there is no carrot. And so they're still in the matrix, just playing a different version of the matrix and replacing material things with spiritual abilities, right? I see that a lot, right? And I was in that. Like, I was taking all these courses and learning how to, move objects and see things and do all the things, which I can. But at the end of the day, I was like, wait, what am I doing? Because God, source, universe, miracles, it's literally happening in a blade of grass right in front of me. And I'm going all over the world to chase these magical powers. That was the aha for me. Right? So I wrote that post. I was at Atma, and a person asked, it was Rod actually, he asked, how would I define God or spirit or universe? My definition is it's in between the space. The two things, or two molecules or two blades of grass, it's the emptiness where the miracles are. And they're in front of us constantly, right? And so it's really just, and once we realize that and feel it and live it, we literally, our entire state changes. We're no longer chasing. We realize that we are, and as strange as it sounds, we are the universe, we are source, and we are God. Yeah. And when you live not from the intellectual understanding of it, but when you live in that place, that frequency, that knowing, you're literally living in miracles. Like miracles just happen. Like, I mentioned it can't be synchronistic. Every moment is synchronistic, right? Every moment has been directed by source, God, universe, which is us. And I find that living in that place is, I'll say, we are all living in that place already. We just get to strip away the illusion that we're not, which is different than we need to do something to get there. We are already there. There's just been a lot of imprints that we're not there. And so really it's about releasing those imprints because we are already there.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we're in the room. We've just been blindfolded and wrapped up. We just got to rip off the blindfold and unwrap ourselves instead of thinking the thing is in the other room that we got to get to and find the key and walk and do all that stuff. So it's a different context. And to address the spiritual bypassing, I think the bypassing comes from the egoic desire to prove to the self and the world that they're farther along in their spiritual journey. And so they don't give themselves space to actually feel the anger, the sadness, the frustration that you felt a year ago, 5 years ago. They're like, oh no, I've let that go. Maybe not. And it's okay to feel those things. And so they kind of push that away. I've done, 8 million Dispenza retreats and I should be here.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Right? Yeah. Maybe you embrace every feeling, what I call the permission to experience the totality of reality. And then you meet it with grace and love.
So stripping that illusion, I'm sure, you said that you were at that point with the spiritual bypassing and trying to do all these different things. Was there an aha moment or was it a constant process of reminding yourself to strip that illusion? Like through meditation, maybe that kind of practice?
Yeah. Great question. A lot of things happen in life where the very thing that I was chasing, that group, that energy, that person, the source of that became friction in my life unexpectedly.
Okay.
And I reflected on it. And what it was because my relationship to the thing was not in alignment with me. No blame on them. My relationship to that process, that person, that situation, that organization, I was still basically egoically chasing the spiritual carrot. And that led to the friction. Okay. And I became aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing.
Yeah.
It's a recent post. I think you posted it yesterday since it's New Year's Eve.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You posted a old paradigm and new paradigm.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Obviously, I mean, it was. Do you want to state what you put?
Sure.
I really liked it.
Yeah, the old paradigm, right, is like New Year resolution, right? And the new paradigm is essentially there's nothing to resolve, right? There are no problems. And so, if I unpack that a bit for people, in neuro-linguistic programming, which a lot of marketers study, neuro-linguistic program, if you and I recommend everybody learn a bit about it because then it gives you awareness of when you are being programmed. Because if you don't know it, you're going to be programmed without you knowing it, right? And so in neurolinguistic programming, there's a thing called a presupposition, right? And so I'm sure you've looked into this and you know this, right? And so imagine if I said to anyone listening that says, is your sadness a 5 or a 10 right now? That's a question with a presupposition that you are sad, right? Like it's just implanted that you are sad. And so this happens in language and marketing all the time that we want to be aware of because it bypasses our conscious awareness and goes into our subconscious and it takes it in as fact, right? This is very powerful programming. So New Year resolution states that you have a problem you need to resolve, right? So all this, what's your New Year resolution? All this talk is implanting the spell that you have problems in your lives, right? And so now that's not good or bad. I just believe that most people who are listening and watching have already mastered the game of experiencing problems, right? I don't think anyone listening is like, no, I don't understand what problems are. I've never experienced any problems. Can you give me more problems? I don't think that's the average listener and viewer, right? Most people are like, I am sick of the problems in my life. And so if that's the case, then you may want to opt out of the language of New Year resolution because you're presuppositioning into your own subconscious, which is running your life, that there are problems, right? And so this is where you can, new language, choose something else. You can choose like New Year intention clarity. Make up whatever. We have this incredible ability to craft whatever spells we want. We just forget that we get to do that.
Yeah. And what you put is harmonize the complete clarity of my intentions with intentionless. And then in open parentheses, let my divine self guide my egoic self life.
Yeah. So that's a little bit deeper, which is what I'm really saying is instead of problems, you're really practicing 100% manifesting, right? Which I remind people, the definition of manifesting is getting what your ego wants. The other side is miracles, which is letting go of any desires, allowing God's source universe to give you the incredible thing that you could not even possibly ask for, and living 100% in both harmony. That's what the second part of that post was.
Yeah, that's powerful. This may have been the longest podcast I've done, and I'm honored to have done it with you. Wealth of knowledge. I'll know everything, like your Instagram and maybe Ammortal, but if there's anything else you'd like to conclude with, either shout outs of where, like other resources where people can find you, or just a lasting message, this is your opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone wants, I don't know, to listen to me more, social media, right? I'm actually mainly on Facebook. I just have it set where whatever I post on Facebook gets on Instagram. So I've only recently got on Instagram, I think in the last year, but either one works. And my parting message for most of the times when I'm on podcasts is get to the outer nesting doll. Whatever you're experiencing, know that the thing that you're experiencing, the situation, the resistance, it's never the outermost nesting doll. Extrapolate and zoom out. And then from there, know that you are a absolute divine being that's been divinely guided with perfection to experience this for a reason. Right? That's a different than there's a problem to solve. Right? And so in this divine perfection situation may come with suffering and pain and hardship and all the things for a reason. Right. And so it isn't about everything has to be love, joy, bliss. Right. And that's my message. And if we just take it as that, like this sense of ease comes into our lives. So.
Beautifully said. All right. Well, I think that concludes it. 3 hours. 3 hours.
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Woo. Peace out.
Yes.